comments.
It's difficult to know if he's a liar or not, because he just doesn't believe anything he says. So I just think a lot of the time he's just lying to himself as well as to us.
Well,
I'd love to know whether he'd take the advice of the president.
Yeah.
The US president gave him some very good advice yesterday.
How embarrassing was that? Humiliation. You know, they haven't put anything out on social media at all.
But every single world leader has to sit through that. I mean, when Trump does that Sun King thing, you know, I'll just Kim Jong-un.
Hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. Julia Hartley-Brewer here with you. I'll be back tomorrow at 6. I'll see you then.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's 4 minutes past 10 o'clock. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it's fabulous to have your company. I very much appreciate you joining me. Lots, as always, I say it every day, but there's always lots to talk about, particularly when the most powerful man in the world is in town. Well, in Turnberry Golf Course in Scotland, of course. And yesterday he held forth, as he does when he's around other world leaders, before the cameras. What was it, about best part of an hour and a half in front of the cameras answering questions. Keir Starmer just sitting there like sort of the work experience boy, occasionally popping up to say, "Oh, Sadiq Khan's my friend." All a little bit embarrassing, but let's face it, every world leader ends up having to go through it, and it's the price you pay of meeting with Donald Trump. But I'd love to know what you made of the advice that Donald Trump gave to our Prime Minister. He told Keir Starmer that he needs to cut taxes, lower energy prices, keep Britain out of foreign wars and cut immigration if he wants to beat Reform UK leader Nigel Farage during a joint press conference yesterday at the Turnberry Golf Course. I want to know, would that sway your vote? If Keir Starmer actually did all of those things, if we did have low energy prices, that would mean dropping net zero. If he did keep us out of foreign wars, and again, you know, we may not have a choice about getting involved in this. If he did actually cut immigration, if he did actually stop the boats, if he did cut taxes instead of raising them, which is what we're expecting from Rachel Reeves this autumn, and what we got last autumn from her as well, would you actually vote Labour? Would you vote for Keir Starmer next time round? If he did the stuff that we say we want done, would you vote him in again? Give me a call. I want to know. Tell us why you would. Tell us why you wouldn't. I'd love to hear your thought. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text us on 87222. You can also get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about Keir Starmer hosting an emergency cabinet meeting today. He's going to discuss the crisis in Gaza and talk about his Middle East peace plan. Yeah, I mean, the idea that Keir Starmer is going to have a say over this, and all this pressure from Labour MPs and Angela Rayner and others in Cabinet about whether or not there should be a recognition of a Palestinian state. And there isn't a Palestinian state at the moment. We don't even know who'd be in charge of it. If you say it's not going to be Hamas in Gaza, then who would it be? Why would anyone be discussing, and yes, I'm talking about you, Emmanuel Macron, and the Spanish government and the Irish government, this virtuously nonsense that just gives succour to the Hamas terrorists of recognising a state that is not a state in any meaningful sense. We're going to be talking more about that. Also, in a talk exclusive from our international editor, Isabel Oakeshott, shocking new footage reveals the life of, well, luxury, which hundreds of migrants are enjoying at an asylum hotel, which many Brits could only dream of in an all-inclusive holiday. Yet more perks being handed out to people who've broken the law to get into this country illegally, and yet are handed out freebies that many people would absolutely love to have as luxuries in their lives. We're also going to be talking about an outrageous interview the Science and Technology Minister, Peter Carl, has done this morning, in which he was defending the Online Safety Act, even though every 16 and 17-year-old lad in the country has already now got a VPN on to avoid, so he can look at online porn, even though they're not 18. And he's claimed that Nigel Farage is on the side of Jimmy Savile and other paedophile predators because he opposes the Online Safety Act and says he would repeal it. I'd very much appreciate your thoughts on that. I'm assuming, as I oppose the Online Safety Act, I must also be on the side of a prolific paedophile. I'd love to hear from you, Peter Carl, whether you think that is the case or not. Not unreasonably, Nigel Farage has called those comments disgusting and says he wants an apology. But will it be forthcoming? Looks like Peter Carl is doubling down. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Tom Slater, I'm delighted to say, as always on Tuesday, joins us, the editor of Spiked Online. We'll get to the conversation about Nigel Farage in a moment, but I really think, wow, this shows the level of desperation we're seeing from Labour in terms of the reform climbing in the polls. But let's just go through Starmer and Trump. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was the right thing to do. When Donald Trump, the most powerful man in the world, is in the country, it's obviously the right thing to do for Keir Starmer to go meet with him. And they had dinner with him. I mean, can you imagine, though, Donald Trump, Keir Starmer and John Swinney, the SNP leader, I mean, at dinner last night, I mean, good God, I mean, and that's the start of the worst joke, you know, these three men walk into a pub. But this, Donald Trump held forth, much as I'm doing right now. Cut taxes, stop the boats, lower energy prices, keep out of foreign wars. It's all good advice, isn't it?
Well, he's just obviously not going to take it. And it did essentially end up sounding like whoever does this is going to win the next election, i.e. Nigel Farage is going to win the next election. So it wasn't as helpful to Keir Starmer as it might have seemed as he was proffering this advice. But to be honest, that was probably not even the worst of the exchanges that they had over the course of the day.
Tell us.
I mean, the Sadiq Khan one. I mean, calling with Donald Trump, you know, revisiting their long-held beef, which, you know, Sadiq Khan has had a big part of maintaining over the years, calling him a nasty person, saying that he's made a mess of London, both of which I think are fair comments. And then Starmer having to very sheepishly push back on this, I thought was very, very funny.
It was when he said, like, he's a friend of mine. He didn't say, no, he's not. You don't contradict the president. But he can say, he can point out, also, he's a friend of mine. Let's have a little listen to Donald Trump talking about, well, how to win an election in the UK.
Generally speaking, the one who cuts taxes the most, the one who gives you the lowest energy prices and the best kind of energy, the one that keeps you out of wars, he's kept you out of wars. And in your case, a big immigration component, you know, because I know that your attitude has become strong on immigration, strong on the toughness of immigration.
I mean, I think what he meant there by Donald Trump is stopping the boats, but obviously he's not doing any of that. And no one's really that convinced that Keir Starmer actually intends and really wants to do it. He's paying lip service to these concerns because we know that actually he thinks people who are opposed to either legal immigration en masse or illegal immigration are just nasty, horrible, racist bigots and far right. I mean, that's what he actually thinks. That's what he's saying. But I can imagine the meetings in number 10 where he's just going, I mean, look, these people are all just ghastly, but we're going to have to play along because otherwise there might be riots on the streets.
Yeah, and it's felt like playing along. I mean, there was a few months ago where he was trying to kind of change his rhetoric, even before the infamous Island of Stranger speech, which he's now U-turned on and then U-turned on again. Yeah. It's hard to keep up. But it was always felt like lip service. And to be honest, I think on this score, this Labour government is kind of behind a lot of other centrist or even centre-left governments across Europe who have recognised that they've really got to deal with this, not just as a sop to their voters, but because it's a problem and it's not going away in this kind of globalised world in which...
And you get, Nigel Farage pointing out, that immigration is to blame for a rise in rape. So we were saying 40% of sexual assaults are now, are being committed by people of foreign nationality. I think in London. I mean, I'm sorry, you've got to start saying something is going on, and we need to tackle this issue. And again, we were talking to one of the mums who's actually a Reform candidate, but a mum in Epping, who was attending those protests outside the Bell Hotel. Saying these are ordinary mums, being genuinely worried about their teenage daughters having to walk past a group of young men, a large group of young men who, by definition, are criminals. They've arrived in the country illegally, undocumented, who coming from countries where they simply do not have the same attitudes. And I've just come back from scuba diving in the Red Sea in Egypt, and I'm fascinated by how many people, in the airport, again, sort of they're allowing their teenage girls to dress, and I'd say inappropriate in any airport, let alone an airport in a Muslim country. One needs to have a certain level of respect. I think if you're in someone else's country, it would be nice if people felt that way about our country. But people thinking it's the Costa del Sol. And thinking, you have the same rights and it's the same behaviour. And it's just not. And the attitudes, and I've seen this when I've been, in the hotel, but with my, 6'3" husband, and how well you and your teenage daughter get treated. And then when your teenage daughter doesn't have her 6'3" dad around, how suddenly the appearance, even of staff in the hotel, suddenly, and I'm to put a point on me actually having to go, do one, actually having to tell staff to, frankly, F off to get away. Now, and those are people who are used to working with Westerners. I'm just saying a lot of these young men, I'm just saying, I don't think they have the attitudes that I would expect of people towards teenage girls when they are here. And everyone feels uncomfortable when people say that. But I talk to the young women in my office and they talk about, the harassment they're getting on the streets in London now. It is an issue. Donald Trump also mentioned Putin in this meeting, and he said that he's going to have to agree to a Ukraine ceasefire in 10 or 12 days' time instead of at the end of that 50-day period he suggested previously, that deadline he gave him to come to the table, when we finally saw a little bit of a cigarette paper between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump on Ukraine. That the 50-day deadline is in 35 days' time. Now, basically, he's saying he's basically, taking that down to 10 or 12 days. Does this have any meaning? Will this make any difference?
I mean, it does seem to often have the immediate impact of some kind of escalation from the Russian side. I mean, there's even been some reports about, prisoners being assassinated in the facilities in Zaporizhia. So it's one of those things where these timelines, they might sound great from Trump's perspective, but it often kind of creates a kind of space in which Russia feels that it can go all out for a period of time, partly as a kind of show of strength, but also because of the fact that it's been clearly delineated when they're expecting more talks to begin. It's nice at least that the mood has shifted here, that Trump has recognised that Putin was not the forced into this invasion, that he was kind of the victim, even if he was lashing out in a slightly over-the-top way. The penny has dropped there. That's good. There is more talk about giving Ukraine the leverage it needs and the weaponry it needs to negotiate from a position of strength. But even so, I think there's still a level of naivety, thinking that you can just make it, you can just sort it all out over a sort of...
and again, you can have peace at any time if Ukraine capitulates. That's not the peace that we're looking for. I mean, just mentioning Gaza as well. Keir Starmer's going to hold an emergency cabinet meeting today about Gaza. I don't know why it's suddenly an emergency he needs to discuss. I'm not entirely sure what the British government has got to do with any of this. There's a lot of pressure from, I mean, pretty much, was it 200 Labour backbenchers have signed this letter calling for the recognition of Palestinian state. Keir Starmer apparently going to be outlining his plan for the Middle East peace plan. I mean, again, as Donald Trump said about Macron, what he says doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. There's no doubt at all there is a massive load of pressure on the Prime Minister within his own political party and voters to recognise Palestine. But it's it is utterly meaningless and pointless virtue signalling nonsense, apart from the fact that it does give succour to the Hamas terrorists currently ruining the lives of everyone in Gaza and still holding, we know, at least 20 hostages verified to still be alive from October the 7th.
No, absolutely. It's at best a virtue signal that will have absolutely no meaningful impact on the ground. I mean, what is this supposed to suddenly spark some kind of process? Who is going to run this government? Is it Hamas? Is it Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who are even crazier than Hamas are? You look at the Palestinian Authority over in the West Bank, it's a corrupt, decrepit, hated regime in that part
haven't had
of the
an
world.
election in 20 years.
Absolutely.
Same as Hamas.
Exactly. This is an absurdity. And yet I think it's engaged in partly because people like Macron, people like Starmer, lame ducks domestically like to pose as great statesmen on the world stage. And there's also a sense that because of the fact that they both have problems with their voter coalition, because of the fact that we did see at the last election Labour actually losing seats to these Gaza independents, there is a desire to at least show that they're moving in that direction. I don't think that will work for them there either. Those kinds of voters are already lost to the Labour Party. If your number one issue is Gaza, you think Keir Starmer is a sellout and complicit in genocide.
But Angela Rayner leading the court, I mean, Angela Rayner is so, everything she's doing right now is quite clearly I'd love to be the next leader. I don't think Keir Starmer's going to last the way. And she's been changed her tune on whether she wants that job even. And she's absolutely pandering to these groups, no doubt at all. I'm quite horrified to see Wes Streeting. Again, someone who I think most people thought was a pretty sane soul before this. He's calling for it. But again, he narrowly won his seat because of a pro-Gaza candidate. And again, we are letting the politics of Hamas, because that's what it is, rule our foreign policy, and that is not a good thing. It's quite extraordinary. Let's talk about the politics of Jimmy Savile. I think this is so outrageous. Peter Kyle, the Science Technology Secretary, in an interview on Sky News this morning, he was asked, and he was given plenty of time to back this up. It wasn't a slip of the tongue, and he's doubled down on social media since. He was asked about Online Safety Act and the fact that a huge number of people have now been downloading VPNs. So these are just obviously ways of just basically getting out of. No one knows who you are. You don't have to verify your identity. So you can download online porn or see anything you want to see if you've got a VPN. I've got a VPN, because I've got a husband in IT, so apparently that's what I have to have. But again, the idea that you're just dodgy because you're using a VPN is quite extraordinary. But he said the most extraordinary thing. He said that it's just outrageous. Make no mistakes. If we have people out there who are extreme pornographers, peddling hate, peddling violence, Nigel Farage is on their side. And he said that because Nigel Farage has said that the Reform Party, if elected, would scrap the Online Safety Act. But Peter Carr said, make no mistake about it, if people like Jimmy Savile were alive today, he'd be perpetrating his crimes online. And Nigel Farage is saying that he's on their side. Now, Nigel Farage has understandably asked for an apology for the disgusting comment. Peter Carr has doubled down, and he's written since on X, if you want to overturn the Online Safety Act, you're on the side of predators. It's as simple as that. Well, I want to overturn the Online Safety Act. So does that mean I'm on the same side as Jimmy Savile as well? Are you? Well,
apparently so. I mean, this was absolutely shameful attack, wasn't it? And I think the fact that he repeated it, that he's doubled down on social media since, I think that would suggest that this was a line he went in there intending to make, maybe even advised to make, maybe even advised to make by Number 10. So this is clearly the way that they're trying to attack this particular issue. Well, because Reform are definitely going for the women's vote now. They've had a lot more male votes than female votes. They're trying to go for the women's vote. Women, women mostly mums.
care about kids? Do you think they think this is a good way of attacking reform?
I suppose so. I mean, it's also, there's been a lot of kind of Jimmy Savile-related mudslinging. I mean, it's funny thinking back to when Boris Johnson accused Keir Starmer of kind of letting Jimmy Savile off the hook because he was, Director of Public Prosecutions for a period when he could have been brought to justice.
Which he did.
And there was this big response from the Labour Party, like, how dare you say this? How dare you kind of...
But it was relevant to his job.
I know, absolutely. And it's one of those things where to see them drop this out now, maybe this is them thinking, you know what, we need to, get down in the gutter a bit more if we're going to take the fight to reform. But I think this is only going to really rebound badly on them. The story this morning is not reform are shamefully siding with the sex offenders. It's Labour throwing this Jimmy Savile insult at them, and I think that's the way it's already landing with people.
Absolutely. I think it's an outrageous allegation, and I'd love to know, Peter Carl, if you think that I'm on the side of Jimmy Savile as well, because clearly you must think that, because I, like many people who defend freedom, on the side of the Online Safety Act, against the Online Safety Act. That said, I do want something done about violent, horrific, nasty, misogynistic, rape scene porn, which is pretty much all porn nowadays, and children seeing it. I don't think the Online Safety Act is the answer. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Please tell me what you think. Was it right for Peter Carl to say this? Was it right for Nigel Farage to demand an apology? Do you support the Online Safety Act? Not get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Love to hear your thoughts on that. And what do you make, crucially, of Donald Trump's advice to Keir Starmer that he needs to cut taxes and stop the boats? That's fundamentally what he needs to do if he wants to beat Nigel Farage. Cut energy prices, stay out of wars as well. But would that sway your vote? Even if, let's just say, Prime Minister did all of that, would that mean you'd support him and you'd vote for him against all your better judgment? You didn't think he'd do it, but he does do it. If, and it's a big if, do you think he would do it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell us why it would make you vote for Keir Starmer. Tell us why, even if he did achieve all of those things, why you wouldn't still vote for him. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
10K cash for Coldplay.
Play 10K cash for Coldplay with 10 grand in your hand tax-free plus 6 super hot tickets to witness Coldplay's sold-out Music of the Spheres tour from a VIP box at Wembley Stadium on August 22nd.
Tickets, top tunes and 10 grand cash.
Don't panic. Enter to play 10K for Coldplay at talksport.com/win and get ready for the feel-good gig of the summer. 10K for Coldplay is a joint TalkSport Limited competition run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio. See talksport.com for terms and conditions.
Across the UK. Across the UK. On DAB+. On your your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This.
Yes, indeed, this is Talk the Home of Common Sense. 10:24 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater's still with me. Let's get to some of your messages coming in about whether your vote would be swayed if Keir Starmer did actually take the advice of Donald Trump and did what he needed to do to beat Nigel Farage, of course, way ahead in the polls right now with his Reform UK party. He could cut taxes, stop the boats, also stay out of wars and lower energy prices. I mean, I think we'd all welcome all of that, would we not? But would that sway your vote? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Let's get some of your messages as well. Samantha says, absolutely not. I'll never vote for Labour. Never have, never will. Bunch of Marxists and communists. I think, Samantha, you need to get off the fence, love. Martin says he needs to stop the boats and cut taxes for the good of the country. He's our PM, after all, and should have British citizens at the heart of his manifesto. Wow, a politician's going to start doing that. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? Put us first. Martin says, would that make me vote for him? Absolutely not. The man is a compulsive liar who seems intent on destroying Britain. Stephen says with Starmer it's just in one ear and out of the other. He will not listen to Trump. And Ricky says by the time we're at the end of these 4 years, the country will be in such a state there will be only one option, and that will be reform. And Martha says still won't get my vote. Starmer is a traitor to this country. Doesn't look like that will do the job for him. That's the interesting thing with Keir Starmer. The things he would need to do to beat Nigel Farage are kind of the opposite of what an awful lot of his Labour voters will want him to do, especially those heading off with Jeremy Corbyn to the U party that's not called the U party. Who knows? Who knows what they're going to do with Zara Sultana? And yet, even if he did achieve things, people still wouldn't want to vote for him because they don't trust him.
No, absolutely. I mean, I, like many of your listeners, are sort of, more than anything else, just tribally anti-Labour, so maybe I'm the wrong person to think about this particular question. But even if he did...
But you're from the left. Your
think,
background is on the left.
Which is precisely why I think the Labour Party is so terrible. I mean, I think historically and now it just seems to have kind of played the role to... Before until about 5 minutes ago, when the working classes completely abandoned it, it was just to kind of again kind of channel that vote in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Can I just say the working class didn't abandon Labour. Labour abandoned the working class. Let's be clear about which direction it happened in. Let's go to the phone lines. Ray is in Colchester. Ray, you wanted to talk about the VPNs, don't you? These are the virtual private networks.
That's the technicality of it. But what we're really talking about is really complete censorship by this communist government that is, literally the walls are closing on us. Every bit of legislation they pass means those things that we completely took for granted, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thought, are absolutely under attack every time this government opens its mouth.
No, but they were under the Tories, Ray. They were under the Tories as well.
Listen, Tories, can you tell me the difference? I didn't notice any difference between them for the last 14 years. But what they're actually doing with today's accusation that if you're against it, you're the same as Jimmy Savile, is a thing called conflation. And this is one of the most powerful rhetorical techniques for a debate. Yeah. And what you're doing is you're associating you with something completely terrible. Yeah. And by doing that, you are then automatically having to defend yourself straight away by saying, oh, I'm not with that. But you've already then conceded the actual discussion to that person. Yeah. And it's a very powerful technique. The only way of calling it out is actually to call it what it is and say, this is what you are doing and this is why you are doing it. Yeah. They are associating you with the worst of the worst because they can't actually defend the actual thing that they've introduced.
And again, this is the thing. That's the whole point of the Online Safety Act was to, you have to have age verifications on sites where you should be over 18. Again, I find it bizarre. You can vote at 16, but you can't watch two people having sex until 18. I mean, utterly bizarre. I mean, pick an age and when you're an adult. But the idea is you cannot verify that someone's a child unless you've verified that someone's an adult. You can't verify someone's an adult unless you've verified who they are through ID, at which point there is no anonymity on the internet. Now, there might be times where we might think, whoa, those people are anonymous, but the people who are abusive on social media, that's not a good thing. But actually, there are lots of very good reasons why people are anonymous on the internet.
Well, of course there are. One of the main reasons for a VPN, if anyone sits there in a cafe somewhere and uses their free Wi-Fi, you're effectively opening up your whole system to anybody to hack in. Yep. And a VPN stops that. So there's absolutely legitimate reasons for a VPN. But what you've got to realise is every single thing this government is doing, those walls of freedom are being moved closer and closer. So our freedom to express, to say, is being absolutely done. And you mentioned there about ID for 16-year-olds, they don't have to, for voting and all the rest of it. Well, that's gerrymandering. They are gerrymandering the system. But the worst bit of that bit on for voting wasn't the introduction of votes for 16. The worst bit was that you now no longer need a photo ID to vote. And that means that anybody with a bank card, which is millions of people who've arrived, no longer have to prove that they have the right to vote.
I don't have an issue. I think there's a big issue with the fact that young people don't have as much access to ID that is accepted. But to get a bank card, you're going to prove, that you're going to have to give an ID to the bank in the first place.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you're a citizen who's entitled to vote here, does it?
No, but then you shouldn't be on the electoral roll in the first place.
You've now gerrymandered the system with millions of people who are no longer able to vote, and if they're split into certain areas...
But you cannot be a citizen of this country and be entitled to medicine and have some ID from that. I don't share your same concern on that. I think people should be able to vote. They need ID. Look, I think when I used to go to Blockbuster Video, I needed more ID than I do to vote. I think that's quite absurd. You made so many good points there, Ray, but I really, really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much for calling. Andrew is on the line. He's in Hertfordshire. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, Julia. Lovely to hear from you. Yeah, in terms, if all was equal, you would vote for someone like Starmer. But actually, you're not voting for him. You're voting for the Labour Party and the Marxists that are within that. And they're holding him hostage. That's why we're doing this Gaza stuff. If he gives them recognition of Palestine, they won't vote down any bills that he's got in the future.
Yeah, but they will. They won't. Now, hold on a second. But you said other things being equal, you would vote. So you haven't got a problem with Starmer. You've got a problem with his party.
I haven't got a problem in this country with an elected individual. But that particular person, you're not voting for Keir Starmer. He is a sham. So you've got to just separate it out. Yeah. He is an individual. Actually, the principle, I get it. We vote for these people. But he is just a front for some of the most evil people on God's earth. And that is the problem we've got. The Labour Party died the moment that actually momentum was created.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Thank you for that. Tom Sater, that's an interesting thing. And we've got Jeremy Corbyn saying his new party. We just mentioned that. Not called the U Party, says his co-leader, Zara Sultan. Although I don't think Jeremy Corbyn's ego would allow there to be a co-leader. And then they set up a website, which is yourparty.com. I mean, I think we should all join. I've got to be honest with you. I think that'd be quite good fun. I mean, absolute nutters. Basically, they're a party for Gaza and the left and the destruction of Britain. And I mean, they really are. I mean, every single thing they stand for is absolute madness, but they are likely, we're told by pollsters, to take some 10% of the vote. You're going to be taking, sort of Muslim vote, young people's votes, the hard left, and they might take some votes from the Greens and the others as well. But it's going to be really interesting. We're seeing this fracturing of the main parties, because Tories, lots of Tory voters going to Reform, but Reform, of course, are getting people from the Labour side as well. The next election is going to be fascinating.
No, absolutely. And there is clearly a constituency for a Jeremy Corbyn, even Zara Sultana-led party. It's not necessarily a huge one, but if you think about
every country's got nutters.
And every country's got, shall we say, kind of young professionals with kind of more moralism than sense. If you think about the kind of Corbyn movement, the sort of horny-handed sons of graphic designers who rallied to that particular front. There's clearly some momentum there, to coin a phrase. There's also, as you say, the voters in the kind of inner cities, British Muslim populations, who back some of those Gazan independents. Yeah. How much you can hold that coalition together, given on social matters, shall we say? There's a lot of differences between those constituencies.
You mean people who are very, very strong on pro-Palestine, not necessarily having the same views on trans?
Absolutely.
I'm shocked.
And those cracks are actually already starting to show in quite interesting ways. The biggest obstacle, I think, to a Jeremy Corbyn or Zara Sultana-led party of the left to be successful is probably Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana. I mean, the way in which they made a complete Horlicks of this move already, I think, speaks to the fact that Corbyn was always the kind of old duffer of the left of the Labour Party. He kind of became leader by accident. It was just his turn to run. Yeah. That was it. Zara Sultana is like an overgrown student union official, just a complete non-entity politically, in my view. So the idea that they are going to be kind of heralding this, even though there is clearly there's clearly something there that could be cultivated. Whether or not they just their own incompetence will get ahead of them will be the question.
I think it's going to be absolutely hilarious, and I can't wait to watch. Anyway, 10:34 is the time. Up next, going to talk to the US editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, about that advice that Donald Trump gave to Keir Starmer, and also whether or not Keir Starmer holding a meeting about Gaza and the Middle East peace plan will make a hoot of difference in what happens in Gaza with Israel. That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back. 10:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk to Freddie Gray right now. He's US editor of The Spectator. Very good morning to you, Freddie.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you for joining me. Well, I'm probably doing better than Keir Starmer because I didn't have to sort of sit and look like a chump next to the US president, the most powerful man in the world, while he sort of yapped on for the best part of an hour and a half yesterday and just sort of like a nodding dog sat there. But pretty much every world leader has to do that. Just first of all, you've watched a lot of these where, I mean, every time someone's invited to the White House, I mean, look, we saw what happened to Zelensky and he got monstered by J.D. Vance as well. But as a general, looking at them generally, did Keir Starmer fare well or badly from that meandering press conference that the Sun King gave yesterday?
I think overall you have to say he fared pretty well. Trump was very keen to say he's my friend repeatedly. Trump clearly likes him for whatever reason. It seems to be his voice. For some reason, unlike every single British person, Trump finds his voice appealing. But I do think you could see where the cracks are in their relationship and where they could get worse, because Trump is deliberately oblivious about aspects of Keir Starmer. He doesn't take a great interest in British politics. I think it's fair to say he takes an interest in personalities. And it was very interesting. He started when he started talking about Nigel Farage. He said, "Nigel Farage, he's my friend. Keir Starmer, he's my friend. They're two parties. Yeah. He didn't mention the Conservative Party at all because the Conservative Party probably doesn't cross his mind.
No, indeed, it's very interesting. And again, he's Donald Trump. Even Trump fans must accept he's fairly loose on facts. He kind of makes up, mortality figures in the Ukraine war. He does. They're up by like a factor of 5 or something. I mean, he just makes up a lot of things and announces these things as facts. By the time you fact checked it, he's on to the next complete nonsense that he's saying. But he said some quite sensible things. Let's have a little listen once again to that clip of what he told, advice he gave to our Prime Minister about how to beat Nigel Farage at the next election. Here's what he had to say.
The one who gives you the lowest energy prices and the best kind of energy, the one that keeps you out of wars. He's kept you out of wars. And in your case, a big immigration component, because I know that your attitude has become strong on immigration, strong on the toughness of immigration.
I mean, this was a pretty good advice. As far as our callers and our messages today are saying, no, Freddie, they're saying even if it is a big if, Keir Starmer did achieve that, they're not sure they would vote for him. But there's no doubt at all. I mean, Donald Trump knows that actually what British voters want is very similar to what American voters wanted when they elected Donald Trump last year.
Well, he spelt it out pretty clearly. It's immigration, but it's also low taxes. What's interesting about Trump's tariffs and so on, that they've caused all this upheaval in the sort of global economy. At the same time, though, economic confidence in America is ticking up because he's extended the tax cuts. He's actually made the tax cuts better for Americans. So while they may be worried about how much they're going to pay for an iPhone, they are seeing more money in their pockets, and their confidence is growing. How we would wish to have that in Britain.
Yeah, and he's reaped 50 billion in tariffs. And again, that is a tax take. That is the thing. Tariffs are a tax. I don't know why he hates taxes, but he loves tariffs, even though they're a tax. But there we are. There was also an interesting moment when he attacked Sadiq Khan, not by name, but the London mayor, and he said he was a nasty man doing a terrible job. And then Keir Starmer had to sort of interrupt with this sort of, he's a friend of mine. That was all very awkward.
Well, but this is Trump's muscle memory for when he's in Britain. He's been doing it. I mean, he did it in his first visits to Britain as president. He started attacking. He had a war of words on Twitter, which is now X.
Didn't he have it on the tarmac when he's visiting his first time? He had it on the tarmac with Sadiq Khan before he'd even got off the plane.
Yes, and then they exchanged fire over Twitter, and it's just something he does hold grudges against certain people, and Sadiq Khan is one of them. But it was wonderful to watch Keir Starmer squirm.
That was good fun.
And I mean, the thing about Trump press conferences, they're sort of odd. They're actually quite boring if you watch the whole thing, but the clips are just gold always.
I know. I have to say, I was yesterday afternoon. I was sort of like, mate, I've got stuff to do. I really need you to stop talking at some point. And the sight of all the aides sitting there, absolutely silent, just when is this going to end? But there was some interesting stuff, in particular Ukraine. He talked about how Russia's deadline, the 50-day deadline, there's 35 days to go on that to come to the table and come to a ceasefire deal. He's now taken that down to sort of 10 or 12 days. That seemed to be a significant development, welcomed certainly by President Zelensky of Ukraine. But we know that his deadlines have a habit of moving, don't we?
Well, he can always pause. He pauses, but he doesn't fold. I think on Ukraine, it was interesting because the pressure from Starmer was clearly on Gaza. Get Trump to say something about Gaza that they can run as, he's turning on Israel. He did a tiny bit, but not really. Most of what he said about Israel was about the Israeli hostages, which is not what Keir Starmer wanted him to talk about at all. But what he takes away with one hand, he gives with another, Trump, because he then just gives 10, 12 days to Russia on sanctions, which is a dramatic escalation. And he says sanctions or tariffs of up to 100%, which really is him turning against Putin in a way that a few months ago would have looked impossible.
Yeah, but and crucially, those secondary sanctions on the countries that are buying his oil and his gas and doing trade, that would have, in the Indias and the Chinas, that would have a massive impact, wouldn't it? But there's also obviously a lot of questions yesterday for Donald Trump about Gaza and about Israel, and he was saying that there is real starvation. He's seen the pictures, and we have seen pictures. Some of those obviously are genuine pictures. Some of those are propaganda. They are very, very sad. They are children who have congenital illness, and it's not as a result of food shortages that they are are looking like that. But some of it obviously will absolutely be real. Either way, it's an absolute disaster for those people, those families and those children, and action needs to be taken. But how likely is it that Donald Trump will put more pressure on Israel, particularly on Benjamin Netanyahu, over humanitarian aid? Or do you think now the aid is going in on a bigger scale that actually that he's going to stand shoulder to shoulder with Netanyahu?
Well, I think Donald Trump's got a very good gut instinct for where public opinion is. And it does seem in the last 2 or 3 weeks in particular that public opinion has shifted against Israel quite dramatically. So he may start to put serious pressure on Netanyahu. There's also, you have to consider his relationship with Netanyahu is complicated.
Yeah.
He was apparently very cross and angry when Netanyahu struck Syria with missiles the other day. And he regards, or people in his tight circle regard Netanyahu as an unreliable ally. They're very pro-Israel. They're just unsure about Netanyahu.
Yeah.
And so there could be a breakdown in relations between Trump and Netanyahu, but Trump's support for Israel is pretty locked in.
Yeah.
His son-in-law is Jewish.
I wish he'd had the same attitude towards Ukraine as he has to Israel. In terms of Keir Starmer having an emergency cabinet meeting today, I mean, again, I don't know what the sudden emergency is about Gaza, but also about possible, these pressure that Keir Starmer is facing internationally, but also on his own backbenchers within his own cabinet from his own deputy prime minister Angela Rayner about recognising an independent, Palestinian state. What do you make of that? Because we know that Keir Starmer's, been under pressure on this. Emmanuel Macron said that France recognise a Palestinian state, and Donald Trump dismissed that, saying it was utterly irrelevant.
Well, you're quite right. The sudden emergency on Gaza, as far as Labour is concerned, is not what's happening there. It's what's happening within the party and within its voter, its base. Labour voters are extremely upset and expressing their anger about Gaza to Labour. They also have the problem of Gaza independence, a sort of Muslim threat to their left. And the backbenchers are in revolt. So they have an internal problem there that they are desperate to address somehow. But Starmer does not want to turn on Israel, so he's in a very difficult position.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been fascinated to see how he managed to resolve this. Really good to talk to you. Thank you very much, indeed. Freddie Grays, US editor of The Spectator. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, to come back to you. Right now, people might be seeing on the screen periodically Donald Trump is opening his new golf course in Aberdeenshire. He's due to make, I think he's just started speaking in the last couple of moments. Again, I'm not really here to publicise golf courses in Scotland, whoever they're owned by. But there's no doubt at all. I mean, a lot of these world leaders, whether it's Macron, whether it's Trump, whether it's Keir Starmer, they are facing an awful lot of pressure over the issue of Gaza, and a lot of this is propaganda pressure. People are terribly concerned about children dying. Isn't everybody? I mean, who hasn't got a moral conscience about that? But they care absolutely zero for a child dying of starvation in Sudan or anywhere else in Africa, by the way, but apparently they care terribly strongly about the children in one particular tiny little slice of land in Gaza. And that's the bit that I find extraordinary.
No, absolutely. And I think it's not only the selective outrage, but it's also the lack of willingness to understand the broader context here in terms of who started this war, why it's continuing to rage, why there have been problems in delivering the aid that the people of Gaza so desperately need.
And why Israel can't just go, oh, OK, we're done now.
It's always a much more complicated picture than people are willing to accept. They just have bought this phony narrative, but it inflames the discussion that we need to have needlessly about how you actually do right by the people who are suffering in the middle of this war.
Absolutely. Again, they're mainly suffering because they are ruled by a terrorist genocidal organisation called Hamas. Have they tried giving up the hostages, releasing the hostages, downing their weapons and saying we will no longer attempt to do another October 7th every single day that we can do that on Israel? Because then the war could be over and the suffering could be over. It's entirely in Hamas's hands, who are the ones who scuppered the latest peace talks. But again, no criticism of Hamas for that, always criticism of Israel. And at the end of the day, that's the reality. 10:48 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about the lovely, lovely, wonderful legal migrants coming to this country, being put up in a luxury hotel and living a life which many Brits could simply not afford. This is a Talk exclusive from our international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. She is up next. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
Well, I think partly it's due to the fact that just in general, governments and legislative bodies are pretty bad at kind of trying to put a framework around technology and the internet. You talk about how long this legislation was in a gestation period for. So much has happened in the period between it even coming forward and it coming around now. In fact, the law was passed last year and they gave themselves an extra year in order to try and come up with a system for verification, because a lot of these criticisms that we're hearing now were put forward at the time the legislation was passed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:51 is the time. Joined now by Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor, with an exclusive, as you would have seen revealed on Kevin O'Sullivan's show last night, about, well, the lap of luxury that some illegal migrants are getting to live in, way beyond the incomes of many ordinary Brits. A very good morning to you, Isabel.
Good morning, Julia. Well, I have long wrestled with how do we get inside a migrant hotel without breaking the law or doing anything really unethical, because to date, until we brought this exclusive, nobody has ever managed to film extensively what life is like behind closed doors. And the government goes to great lengths to ensure that ordinary taxpayers and people who are actually paying for the lifestyles of these asylum seekers never actually get to see what goes on. And now finally somebody has managed to get behind closed doors, not just for a few hours, not just for a couple of days, but for 3 whole months, during which he was able to film exactly what has been going on. And that person is Aston Knight. He was a contractor, so he didn't have to sign any of those very frightening, heavy-handed and non-disclosure agreements that ordinary employees have to sign. And he really has lifted the lid on what an extraordinary operation it is to provide everything that these migrants are deemed to require. What struck me, I mean, it's hard to know quite where to begin with all this footage, but I think it's the sheer scale of it that struck me. The endless agencies, public agencies coming in and out of that hotel, providing everything that the rest of us have to pay and wait for.
And again, we've heard a lot about, the access to GPs, to free dentistry. A lot of people would, just love to know if their local dentist would ever actually have an opening on their list for them and their children. The food, and we've got some footage there in terms of, they're getting food, lunch, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Again, they're in a nice hotel. Now, I remember a few years ago when we was exposed that the people were living in 4-star hotels, having arrived on these dinghies, and the Tories said no, people, at least it's going to be, a down market hotel. This is a nice looking hotel. We've got the footage on the screen right now. This is the sort of hotel a lot of people might look at like, go there for an anniversary weekend or something.
I mean, it's a genuinely really nice looking hotel. I think it's a 16th century place originally.
I mean, this looks lovely. Look at the footage we've got, the 4-poster beds.
Actual 4-poster beds, no exaggeration there. And one of the things that struck me again about what was filmed is the contrast between what the migrants are given and the staff accommodation, which the person who took all this footage, Aston Knight, described as not much better than a prison cell. And again, he's provided the video footage, the evidence of that, and staff are kept in very, very barren little rooms with no Wi-Fi, no television, none of the luxuries that the migrants have. By the way, as well as the mobile phones that migrants are issued with, they keep the landlines on in the hotel, and they're spending half the time making international calls. I mean I can't believe this stuff.
I don't know anyone who can afford to make an international call on the landline. But this thing, I never understand why are they needing mobile phones? We constantly got footage of people arriving on dinghies with their mobile phones. They're taking photos and videos while they're on those boats, for goodness sake. I mean, again, it is just extraordinary that you can understand why someone might need a mobile phone in that scenario, but there are lots of people homeless on the street who might need a mobile phone, or former veterans might need a mobile phone. I mean, there are lots of people looking for a job might need a mobile phone, but we don't hand them out willy-nilly to them.
Well, we're handing out an awful lot more. There was footage of migrants being provided with musical entertainment and music lessons. There was evidence that most of the men are working in full knowledge of those running the hotels who don't seem to think it's their job to communicate with the Home Office and say, hey guys, by the way, did you know that most of the people in this migrant hotel are actually working illegally? Apparently they don't seem to see that as their job. They're very pally with the so-called service users. Staff and so-called service users worship together in the conference room that has been turned into a mosque. Look, all of this from top to bottom is completely and utterly bonkers. And I really think if anything demonstrates the need to shut down this whole system, it is this inside footage that for the first time confirms not only everything that we've all feared, but so much worse. I didn't know, by the way, that female migrants are able to basically come here and have children, get pregnant while they're in migrant hotels in order to bolster their case to remain. Our source says that in the time of that particular hotel, there have been 10 babies born to occupants.
So they're handing out mobile phones, but not contraception, which you think would be a bit cheaper. But again, this is the thing, and we know that would make their case stronger with our courts. Well, you can't deport a mum and her baby. Of course not. Again, do we know whether the women are even choosing to get pregnant, or whether the dads are forcing them? We don't know. But this is the thing. When Keir Starmer talks about smashing the gangs, and when Rishi Sunak talked about stopping the boats, you're never going to stop the people who are making millions upon millions out of the people's, not desperation, their urge to come to this country, when they do not get these sort of benefits in France, and they come here because they know this is what on offer, and they know they can see footage from their mates who've already arrived. They know what they're going to get. And everybody who has pointed this out, the French president, others, just gets laughed at and ignored. But at the end of the day, people are going to still keep coming en masse while this is what is on offer to them.
And why wouldn't they? I mean, it's absolute no-brainer. I mean, all of this is advertised extensively, and it's not difficult to find the adverts. And on another show, I'll bring you some examples of just what's freely available. It's not difficult to actually find a people smuggler. This is why I don't understand why Keir Starmer has been so spectacularly unsuccessful in smashing any gangs, because I could provide him with the mobile phone details of 2 or 3 people smugglers in the next 24 hours.
Exactly.
But there'll always be another one that takes their place, won't they? It's got to be that we tackle it from the side of, hey, maybe let's not offer everybody this stuff.
Yeah, it's really that, and the ability to work. And I think there's an argument for people saying, we need to stop, ordering Uber Eats and Deliveroos until they agree that only people who are legally allowed to work are actually delivering that food to us. Isabel Oakeshott, it's a fantastic scoop. Well done to you, and yet another brilliant scoop from you. Talks International editor there, Isabel Oakeshott. Some Slater watching that. I mean, again, often we hear about, they're living a life of luxury. And you're thinking, really, that looks like a genuinely really nice hotel that most people in Britain who are struggling to pay their bills would not be able to afford. And yet people who are arriving here illegally living like that. No, I don't want people being, in an underground prison cell. I mean, we have to have some humanity. But I'm definitely of the view, we are talking about people need to be in camps now, not in nice accommodation, because we're not going to dissuade people otherwise.
And the problem is, the reason that we're having to have this discussion about, okay, we're going to close the hotels, so where they're going to go now? Are we going to be revisiting the RAF bases? Are they going to try and sort that out? Barges, whatever. It's because they haven't been able to control the border. All these problems are downstream from not being able to control the border.
And you can't control the border when people want to come here because they're going to get.
And if you want an asylum scheme, do it properly, do it in a way that people support, and manage it. None of this free for all.
Absolutely. Well, we'll talk more about that in the next hour. Lots more coming up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater, editor of Sparkline Online, is also with us. And whether you are listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is great to have your company. If you're watching, by the way, you get to see a lot of footage of Donald Trump, who's still been yapping away at his new golf course. I'm not going to publicise. I don't know why everyone else is publicising this man's golf courses. He's, that's not our job here, but there we are. I'm with you live until 1 o'clock. Don't forget, by the way, to go to my YouTube page if you miss any of the show. It's called the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Nice and easy to find. If you hit subscribe, you'll never miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about Donald Trump giving Keir Starmer some advice on how to beat Nigel Farage, his good friend Nigel Farage. He said that Keir Starmer needs to cut taxes and stop the boats. He also needs to lower energy prices and keep out of wars. Well, I mean, a lot of us would be pretty keen on all of those things, wouldn't we? But I want to know from you, if it's a big if Keir Starmer did achieve any of that, would that sway your vote? Tell us why it would. Tell us why it wouldn't. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us at talkTV. Don't forget the calls are charged at the national rate and text costs £1 standard network rate message. We're also going to be talking more about Nigel Farage blaming immigration for the sharp rise in rapes and sexual assaults, saying there is a direct link between rising rates of sex offences to the wholly irresponsible increases in immigration. And by the way, this is not the case just for the UK. This has also been the case across Germany, across Austria, across France, across Italy, in Sweden as well. This is across the board in Europe. Wake up, everybody. Oh, by the way, though, if you say this, of course, you're just a racist and a bigot, because that's what you get shouted at if you do say things that are based on, official statistics. Plus, the NHS has accused the BMA, the doctors' union, of risking patient safety by refusing emergency requests to allow striking doctors to cross picket lines and return to work to stop patients coming to harm. The BMA has rejected 18 requests from NHS hospitals to give patients care, including cancer care that was much needed. We're going to be talking more about that as well. As I say, lots more coming up, lots more to talk about. Tom Slater, as I say, is still with us. Just to recap a little bit on what Donald Trump has had to say, he's been opening his latest golf course, and he says he's going to be putting out fires all over the world when he returns to Washington, D.C. today. He's going to play the golf course very quickly and go back to D.C. He said, we did one yesterday, as you know. We stopped the war. We've stopped about 5 wars. So that's much more important than playing golf, as much as I like it. He also had praise for John Swinney, the First Minister of Scotland, with whom he had dinner alongside Keir Starmer last night. I mean, can you imagine two men you would least want to have dinner with if you were Donald Trump? Keir Starmer, I'm the leader of the free world. Yeah. I'm the most powerful man in the world. And I'm on a golf trip and I end up having dinner with Keir Starmer and John Swinney.
You'd better crack with kind of 2 regional managers or something like that. Similar kind of levels
middle
of
managers.
Charisma. I mean, it's
assistants. No, aren't they assistants to the regional managers?
Trump did most of the talking. And not because he's the most powerful man in the world, because what have those two got to say for themselves?
I'd love to meet Trump and have a talk-off with him. I bet I could win. Trump said that Swinney was a terrific guy and loves golf and loves the people of this country. You're a really special guy, he said. There we are. He also talked about that US-UK trade pact. He said it was a great deal for everybody. It was a very big deal, a great deal for the country, a great deal for everyone. I just want to thank Keir Starmer and everybody who worked so hard on it. It's very interesting, of course, the trade deal with the EU, hailed as the biggest deal ever, being very much criticised by the French Prime Minister and the German Chancellor. No, it looked and smelt like a capitulation, didn't it, really? And it was a bit of a reminder, wasn't it, that we were told that the EU was, absolutely impossible to get one over on, that you couldn't possibly play hardball with them, but maybe we would have gone a little bit further. Obviously, we don't have the might of the global economic and military hegemon at our disposal, but they've no clue what they're doing. No, indeed. But they were on 30%, weren't they, tariffs, and now now down to, or 25 down to 15%, but we're on 10. I've lost track, frankly. These seem to change every 5 minutes, but we've got lower rates. The key thing there, bear in mind, our EU negotiations post-Brexit, with Theresa May sold us down the river, and basically, the people doing the negotiations until we got some people who actually were Brexiteers in, like Frost. But basically, they were trying to give us a bad deal because they wanted it to be a bad deal, so they thought people would then vote to go back in again.
They might as well have sat on the other side of the negotiating table. It would have made a lot more
absolutely,
sense,
absolutely. It was absolutely outrageous. Again, Keir Starmer and people like that who would be, pushing that along as well as a shadow Brexit secretary. We digress, though. Donald Trump told Starmer yesterday his advice on how to win the next election, how to beat Nigel Farage. Let's have a little watch and listen to what he had to say.
Generally speaking, the one who cuts taxes the most, the one who gives you the lowest energy prices and the best kind of energy, the one that keeps you out of wars. He's kept you out of wars. And in your case, a big immigration component, because I know that your attitude has become strong on immigration, strong on the toughness of immigration.
Strong on the toughness of immigration. I'm not sure he really knows what's really going on. I mean, I was saying on the show yesterday, shouldn't Keir Starmer take advice from Donald Trump on things like, net zero? He was quite right about the wind turbines, but also on immigration, illegal immigration. There's no doubt at all. Keir Starmer he's in a 40% rise. Donald Trump has basically cut it by about 90% or something on the border with Mexico.
I know exactly. He should be taking his advice, but he's not going to. Is he? Because I think with Keir Starmer, just on this issue, as with many others, net zero, what have you, he just hasn't quite got his head around the fact that not only are these things real problems, doing real damage in the here and now, but also people have noticed they're not going to put up with it. There's this kind of sense of, give us a few more years and you'll have the green energy you need. Actually, if you just let us tinker around the edges, we'll sort out the migration problem, or maybe you just will stop noticing it. Those days are over, but he still hasn't quite realised
But also the power of when people do notice it and say it. And I still remember when Nigel Farage first went out on a boat in the Channel and was pointing out these migrant boats arriving. And again, absolutely decried as a horrible racist. These were desperate asylum seekers. And even when Labour talk about needing to stop the boats, it's nearly always about because these people are drowning in the Channel. I've got to say, I've got to the point where, and I know I sound like a horrible human being at this point, and certainly not kids drowning, because they shouldn't be on those boats at all. People should be something more prosecuted for putting their kids on those boats. But I find it hard to have concern for people who are choosing to get on a dinghy. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to look at a dinghy with 50 people on it and go, yeah, maybe that's not safe. You want to take your life in your hands to go from a perfectly safe country. It's not like you're being shot at on the beaches of France and you're desperately trying to escape a totalitarian ruler or anything. You're perfectly safe. If you choose to get on that boat, yes, I still want them to be rescued if they're in trouble, all of that, but I struggle to think that is the highest priority for this country.
But even without wanting to sound like a sort of bleeding heart liberal where this is concerned, the fact that we've had governments happily preside over a completely broken system, which does incentivise some people, not many people, and yes, they do have responsibility for taking their own lives in their hands, to just run the gauntlet of smuggling gangs across the continent, of this perilous crossing, conditions in migrant camps both in France and living in the black market in the UK once they get over here. I mean, all of this it's a moral horror story all over the shop. The fact that people have successive governments have been relaxed about letting it continue because to deal with it would make them feel uncomfortable, or it would just admit that there was a problem.
Yes, but as you said, we've noticed. We've noticed, and not only have we noticed, and we've been talking about it, shouting bigot and racist and hateful and all the other ones. It doesn't work anymore. It doesn't. You can't just say we're all Tommy Robinson. You can't just call us all far right. No, it doesn't work anymore.
It's not. It's also really just this clearly cannot hold. I mean, even in those migrant hotels in Epping, one of them was burnt down a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, I should say, that someone attempted to start a fire again in the Bell Hotel. It was the person who's been arrested, allegedly for doing this, was a resident of the hotel themselves. This is becoming just a complete mess for everyone concerned, whether inside those hotels, outside those hotels, in the community. It's not sustainable. And as you say, the difference is now people have noticed and they're not dealing with they're not accepting the gaslighting answers that we've had.
They're refusing. And again, and Isabel Oakeshott, we just spoke to expose of what's going on inside one particular hotel, which is quite clearly a luxurious hotel, 4-poster beds, very so again the sort of place you might go for your wedding anniversary, and as a special treat. I'm sorry, but these young men are living there. They're working. They're being given free meals a day, accommodation. Lots of people are really struggling every single day to put food on the table for their kids and pay their rent and pay their bills, and they're getting everything for free. And I think people are completely reasonable to say, no, I'm sorry, that is not good enough, and it's not going to wash anymore. Again, Tories ignored it for years, then paid lip service to it. Labour have only paid lip service to it so far. They've not done anything about it. And they're going to say we're going to get people out of the hotels. They want to get people out of the hotels into homes because it won't show up as much. But that's even worse because these people will be in the community. There'll be no monitoring, not such as there is at the moment. That is an even bigger disaster. And they will be competing with, they're often offering double the rent, Serco and other companies. It's going to be an absolute disaster for local people. Local people are not going to put up with it. And I'm with Nigel Farage, and so I do think we are going to see more protests. I want them to be peaceful. They need to be peaceful. In a democratic country, there's no excuse for protests not to be peaceful. But I can see why things end up, people are very angry, end up turning out the way they do. And we're going to talk about this with Richard Tice, actually, coming up in the next half hour, the deputy leader of the party. A lot of this ties in, again, with the whole sort of that. You've got Yvette Cooper as Home Secretary, who's someone who I've interviewed a number of times. Hasn't come on the show for years because, I expect her to answer questions. Sorry about that, Yvette. But, asking her once about, border, like, well, how many, what level of migration would you accept? Or, and again, how many zeros? How many, a million? Give a, there must be a number that which you'd be going, that's enough now. There is an extraordinary case. A court has basically told the Foreign Office that a family from Gaza, 6 members of the family, they got a family member somewhere in England, so a distant second cousin or something, and they have appealed for human rights, the right to come to this country because their life is intolerable. They've been displaced, they've been bombed, they're hungry in Gaza, and the right of this family to come to this country. The Foreign Office said no because it would open the floodgates. The court has said that the Foreign Office has to think again. And now, bearing in mind that a large swathe of Labour MPs and probably some of the cabinet think that actually we should be taking asylum seekers, they would see them from Gaza, that would open the floodgates. But given where we are with an emergency cabinet meeting being held today by the Prime Minister, a sudden new emergency, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed since the last cabinet meeting. But he's got pressure from Labour backbenchers. I think 200 have now signed this letter. He's got Angela Rayner snapping at his heels and a sort of, showing a bit of leg. Not when she's meeting with Muslim community leaders, then she's in full, Victorian attire, but otherwise showing a bit of leg to Labour lefty backbenchers going, hi, I'm an alternative leader in waiting. And they're going to have a debate about and a conversation about whether they should recognise the state of Palestine, a state which simply does not exist in any meaningful sense, and such as it does, it's run by 2 pretty much terrorist organisations.
And it's another reminder of how screwed up their priorities are. I mean, I think as ever, when you've got a government and a Prime Minister who have become increasingly disliked domestically, there's this desire to pivot back to the international stage. But I just don't think they're going to be able to ignore the domestic situation for much longer for all the reasons that we've been talking about. It's getting worse. More and more people are noticing it. I was out on Sunday reporting from the Canary Wharf protest outside of the Britannia Hotel. And what's interesting, not only are more people coming more emboldened to come out and make their voices heard, they're also not straight out of central casting the way that you might expect. A lot of families, interracial couples, people of all different backgrounds, legal migrants as well. There was a group of Chinese migrants there, young
I saw that footage
who were holding up a banner saying legal against illegal migrants. And this is, I think, a reminder that this is well beyond the idea that these are kind of out-of-town agitators. It's kind of local communities, either the kind of, in that case, the kind of local Isle of Dogs working class communities, as well as the kind of incoming young professionals from abroad, coming together to voice their displeasure about this. Exactly. And I think now, as a consequence of that, there has to be some sort of response. But no one seriously believes that Labour is capable of digesting this issue, let alone acting in response to it. So therefore, you're just left with them continuing to thrash around, try and change the subject to anything else, and wait for the eventual electoral collapse. That's what it feels like.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, again, if they actually did deal with any of this, if Donald Trump's advice was heeded by Keir Starmer and he cut taxes, he stopped the boats, low energy prices, all of that to beat Nigel Farage, would that sway your vote? Would that actually make you go, do you know what, I'll vote for Keir Starmer if he actually does the stuff that actually I want? Or would, even if he did it, if you believed he would do it, or capable of doing it, would you still go, no, I wouldn't vote for him, I'd still want another alternative at the next election? I'd love to have your thoughts on that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Something else I want to talk about, this is very, very important, which is today is the first anniversary of the Southport attack, in which 3 little girls were stabbed to death. Another 8 little girls were also stabbed, some having horrific, life-changing injuries, 2 adults as well. Axel Rudiger is now behind bars for the best part of his life, thank God. Clearly he should have been stopped beforehand. Clearly there were too many opportunities that were missed. There are too many people on our streets who are a danger to us. This has opened up a whole can of worms in terms of the prevent strategy and their failures as well. Social workers, police, security services, everybody. But of course also in the wake of the Southport attack we did have the riots, we did have the outrageous, I say, disinformation that went out from the government, and the lies about and the lies of omission about what we could or could not know about the suspected killer at that time. The ricin that was found in his home, and the Al Qaeda terror training manual that were not disclosed until I think October of last year, ahead of the trial. There are people still in prison right now over those riots, not for violence. And you know what? You throw a brick at a police officer, you threaten to actually go to a hotel and burn down a hotel with asylum seekers in it, you absolutely should be behind bars. But people like Lucy Connolly and others who wrote tweets in anger, in distress when they heard the news about these children, hers was deleted, still behind bars right now. And this, of course, as we've now got the Online Safety Act coming in, more and more control, more and more censorship of what we can see and what we can say online. Your thoughts on that, Tom?
Well, there's so much, isn't there? I think starting with the attack itself, I think one of the reasons that it's so horrific is because it's the depravity of it, the barbarism of it is something that you're very rarely confronted with as a society. It's not to say that we haven't had horrific kind of child killings before, we haven't had serial killers and so on.
But this one hit us all in the stomach.
Absolutely, the details of it, the fact that these were young defenceless girls, all of these things I think were so uniquely horrifying. What then gets piled on top of that is that you hear such a familiar story, which is that this killer was very much known to the authorities. He wasn't on a terror watch list or anything like that, not as some of the kind of misinfo merchants of the hard right were trying to suggest in the wake of those attacks. But he was referred to prevent 3 times. He, after having showed up to school with weapons, attacked classmates, it was quite clear that whilst he wasn't an ideological terrorist in the way that we might conventionally think of them, he was obsessed with violence, he was obsessed with murder, he was luxuriating in those kinds of materials, everything from things in Northern Ireland through to things that had happened in Africa, through to terror attacks in the Islamist sort of worldview. And this was obviously someone who needed to be taken off the streets, who needed to be dealt with, who needed to be put in some kind of institution. And yet, because he didn't fit into one category or the other, it was a computer says no. It was
totally, So,
and then it's because of that kind of fundamental failure, because of the fact that this is the sort of thing that people have almost come to expect from a government and a state that seemingly can't keep even its most vulnerable citizens safe. It's precisely that mistrust of the establishment which helps create the kind of atmosphere that we saw afterwards. It's not to excuse it, but people saw what happened in Southport. They saw that information was being withheld from them and they assumed the worst. They believed things that were put out by genuinely bad actors on the internet because of the fact that they've really ceased to be able to even listen to the state when it tries to inform them as to what's going on or to tell them why they can't give them certain information. So
and we're seldom being told that when did the Prime Minister know about the ricin and the terror manual? And so when he went on television and said, this is all being stirred up by the far right, this isn't a terror attack, and when he was saying those things, did he already know? Of course he sodding well did, otherwise he would say I wasn't told about this. There's no way in the world he didn't know about this stuff. But again, I think a lot of people feel like the attack on freedom of speech since then. And again, there are lots of things. And again, I don't hold Lucy Connolly up as a paragon of virtue. I think what she wrote was absolutely foul. I don't hold those thoughts. Even in the wake of John dying, she herself had lost a child. I can understand she felt that people say and do things in the heat of the moment. She deleted that tweet. There's no evidence whatsoever that what she wrote, burn all the effing hotels down with the asylum seekers in it for all I care. There's no evidence whatsoever that anyone went, oh well, because Lucy wrote that on Twitter, I went and did it. No evidence at all. And yet we have seen even people who've taken part in grooming gangs. Hugh Edwards, who was sent and didn't seem to have an issue with being sent porn of babies being raped.
And it's
babies being raped. Okay, no prison time whatsoever. But what she wrote, she's still in prison now. The two-tier justice, the two-tier courts, the two-tier policing. We've seen the two-tier policing even around, the Bell Hotel, the bussing in and bussing out again of the hard left. They're the extreme left. They are properly extremist. These people. These are the pro-migration, socialist work a lot. They are properly extreme. A lot of them wearing masks. It's always a giveaway when people are wearing masks. Okay, and the police they are constantly now taking sides when we've got these troubles on our streets.
And it's also the warped priorities, isn't it? Because of the fact that obviously, as we've already talked about, anyone who engaged in that despicable racist violence that gripped the country in the wake of Southport, of course they should have the book thrown at them. I don't think anyone has any problem with that. The fact that the same vigour was being visited upon people who had posted, again, quite despicable, often quite racist things on the internet, just struck most ordinary, sensible people as if, at best, a complete waste of time, and at worst, quite sinister in the context of a crackdown of freedom of speech. And it wasn't just Lucy Connolly. There were people. There was a young man who was given an even longer sentence for copying and pasting what she had posted and sending it out to his 127 followers. The idea that that could have sparked anything is obviously beyond me. People just posting racist material, again, despicable, but we're not talking about inciting violence. People posting misinformation were arrested, in some cases actually prosecuted. So, but
when it was posted by, the leader of Hope Not Hate, he posted that there'd been an acid attack on a Muslim woman, absolutely made up nonsense. Police never turned up at his door, and that was absolutely something that could have incited violence the other way around. But no action taken against him. That's the thing. I'd tell you what, if you want to take part in any of these protests against migrant hotels, you want to join the Free Speech Union first, and you need to absolutely then call them up if you do get arrested for saying things. You're doing stuff. I think, it's about free speech, not free violence, But I would strongly suggest joining the Free Speech Union so you've got that legal advice. But, that's my strong advice to you. 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on the Southport anniversary. We're going to be talking to Richard Tice in a few minutes about the Online Safety Act and that, I would say, outrageous attack from Peter Carr, Government Minister, on Nigel Farage, saying he's on the side of Jimmy Savile and other predators when he says he would oppose the Online Safety Act and would scrap it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And also Donald Trump giving Keir Starmer advice on cutting taxes and stopping the boats if he wants to beat Nigel Farage. Would that sway your vote if he did achieve it? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
well as solar and all the rest of it. But we need to get serious about this, because the technologies of the future, if we're going to hope to compete, when you go on your ChatGPT or your Grok or something, or even Google and look something up now, you're using huge amounts of energy for the great big data centers that artificial intelligence require. And we are going to get left in the dirt unless we get real on this. The answer, in my humble opinion, is to get real about nuclear energy. It's why the French are so much better than us on this respect only.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:28 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls coming in on lots of different topics, actually. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's go to Roger, who is in Cheshire. And Roger, you want to talk about the migrant hotels. What do you want to say?
Yeah, well, it must be over a year now. There's one hotel called Etrop Grange, which is sort of next to Manchester Airport, and it's one of those places where if you were having a wedding and you didn't really mind what it cost, that was the place to go to.
Yeah.
If you went for dinner, it was worthy of a very special occasion.
Yeah.
It's now a migrant hotel.
It's just, I mean, it's just bizarre, isn't it? I mean, I know a lot of hotels have been struggling, but again, getting people in because people are doing Zoom meetings instead of, the business men and women turning up. But I know they're often paid more to give it over to migrants than if they had paying guests.
Well, I could see the point, because it was a very, well, I'd say top price hotel and restaurant. So they probably had problems keeping it as an economic level.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden somebody comes along with guaranteed income for 100% booking.
Yep.
That's a sort of unheard scenario.
And you can understand why the hotel companies, hotel businesses, they take those offers. But I mean, that's the thing though. But a hotel that most people couldn't dream of affording, and that's where people are being housed.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think of the protests that have been going on? Do you think that's something that you would ever join in?
Where I live, there are no hotels, funnily enough. But if there were, I would go along and watch and see what was going on. I wouldn't make a great fuss. I'm not so sure I'd carry a banner particularly, but I'd register some sort of, statement.
That's very interesting. And on the question that I'm put out today, that Donald Trump's advice to Keir Starmer, if you cut taxes, it stops the boats, lower energy prices, no foreign wars, to beat Nigel Farage, he said that's what he should do. If Keir Starmer did actually adhere to all of that, would you vote for him?
Never.
Why not?
Well, first of all, I don't think he knows what he's saying. And I don't think he really knows how to achieve what he's saying. They keep talking about going for growth. Well, it's like a salesman saying, who doesn't sell the product, I need to sell more units. Well, the answer is, how are you going to do it? Yeah. It's
kind of, we kind of expect our prime ministers to be able to actually do the stuff they say. Mad idea, isn't it? Oh, Roger, thank you for your call. Appreciate that. Let's go to Peter, who is in Bushy. Peter, you want to talk about, this cabinet meeting we've got today. The conversations Donald Trump and Keir Starmer had yesterday, all about Israel and Gaza. What do you make of it all?
What do I make of their meeting? It's a complete and utter waste of time, if you want. First of all, they're not going to influence what's going on in Israel.
Exactly.
And, what is angering me so much is that the coverage that we're getting on Gaza is coming almost totally from the Hamas propaganda unit.
Yep.
You don't even know how much is actually accurate. I think the humanitarian crisis is vastly overrated. I think the amount of aid that's gone in and hasn't been distributed by the United Nations is diabolical. But I think Hamas are controlling all the information coming out of Gaza. Particularly the deaths at the aid centres. Why would Israel want to fire on innocent civilians going for
This
aid.
has been exactly my point. Why on earth
would they
if they're
want to?
taking aid in and then they're just going to go, yeah, just for a laugh, we'll just shoot and we'll just bomb a whole load of women and children. Why would they do that? And would know the international condemnation? But
it's
also,
completely dopey.
have you not
And
been surprised by the fact that everyone's got a mobile phone, but not a single bit of footage of any one of these events has ever emerged?
I mean, even some of the pictures of so-called emaciated children, turns out they're children that have got serious illness and they're not starving at all.
Yep.
But what disturbs me more is the way the international community are ganging up against Israel. And what they don't realise is they're doing untold damage to the possibility of a ceasefire because they're emboldening Hamas. And Hamas aren't interested in their own people. They just want to win at any cost, and they don't care how many of their own people get murdered. And to constantly criticise Israel when they're doing their best to protect innocent civilians, but calling about genocide is absolute nonsense. And the idea of creation of a Palestinian state, between you and me, Julia, it won't happen in your lifetime, my lifetime, or my children's lifetime.
I agree.
It won't happen. Absolutely.
Peter,
will not
I
happen.
wish you were in that cabinet meeting today and was actually able to sort of slap some sense into some of these cabinet ministers who want to do their virtue signaling, which, as you say, is emboldening Hamas, who are the ones who've broken down the latest ceasefire talks. And it's absolutely fascinating. The condemnation of Israel, if they don't agree to something, absolutely widespread. Hamas making such absurd demands that even Qatar, who basically on the side of Hamas, even Qatar walked away from the table. That tells you no condemnation of Hamas whatsoever. Peter, great call. Thank you so much. 11:33 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to Professor Carol Sikora about the BMA basically refusing requests from hospitals for emergency care to save patients even while they're on strike. Day 5 of that strike today. It's finishing tonight. But also we're going to be talking to Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, after there's extraordinary remarks from a government cabinet minister about Nigel Farage. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Tom Slater's still here with us. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And right now, Professor Carol Sikora joins us. He's Medical Director of the Rutherford Cancer Centres. Very nice to speak to you. Long time no speak, Carol. Oh, you're
Hi,
there?
Julie.
Oh, well, hello there. We got you there. It's been a very long time. to get you on today to talk about those doctor strikes. 5 days of strikes. We're expecting a lot more over the next 6 months. But one of the sort of rules during strikes is that if there is an emergency, say there was a major terror attack or a terrible disaster, the doctors would abandon the strike and they would go to save lives. And I think we would all understand and expect that. But the NHS has accused the British Medical Association, the resident doctors union, of risking patient safety. They said they've refused emergency requests to allow striking doctors to cross picket lines and return to work. The 5-day resident doctor strike began on Friday morning, and they said the BMA has rejected 18 requests from NHS hospitals for doctors to break the strike to stop patients coming to harm, and that includes some cancer care as well. What do you make of that?
I think it's terribly sad. I think they've dug a hole. Both sides over the last week have dug a big hole for themselves. It looked good a week ago before it started. I thought it had been resolved before Friday morning, but clearly it wasn't. And what's really happened now is the BMA, whoever it represents, I'm not a member, so you can't blame me, has dug itself in with this incredible position where they're not even allowing the derogation, which is the allowing doctors to come in if the hospital says, look, it's a bit urgent here, could we get someone to come in? I mean, it's all judgmental. What's counted as urgent? Anybody that's ill wants to be seen as quickly as possible. And we don't always get that out of the NHS. As you know, getting a GP appointment is like getting gold dust at the moment. So I think the strike is really dug in now. It's going to go on till Christmas. I can't see any other option.
Well, no, especially with their demand. I mean, they're talking about 29%. They're based on increase in pay, basing their claims that they've lost that much since, I think, 2008 is the date they give, which was, as has been pointed out many times, based on one inflationary scale, but also a particularly exceptional year when they were getting exceptional payments that were a highly unusual year in terms of what they were earning then, and they'll know that. But we've also seen the problem that the doctors are hunkering down, even though actually I think only a third of all doctors working as resident doctors actually voted for the strike in total, because there are many who aren't members of the BMA. But we've now got the nurses union, the RCN, basically saying, well, we don't think we're going to accept our payoff, which is, of course, a tiny, tiny fraction of that, just over inflation levels now, because we accepted that last time round. The doctors got a 22% pay rise and then a 4.5% pay rise. Why should we be settling for single figures when they're getting double figures?
You're right. The whole system's shaken, and we're going to see the nurses go on strike almost certainly. How they do it, how they deal with emergency care, I'm not sure. The whole system is under pressure. I think part of the problem for the doctors, I've been a junior doctor once, we all have, and it was fun then, and we supported the whole thing. And, we were dedicated. These guys are still fine. They love it when they come out of medical school, Julia. I mean, it's just fantastic. They feel great. Their families feel great. They've done really well. It's a challenge to get into medical school. Mm-hmm. Once you're in, you're okay. Most people, once they get selected to go in, qualify. Very few % don't make it. So what's the problem when you get you know what's going to happen, you know what the salary is, you know everything. I think the BMA have been taken over by some pretty unusual people, and they've persuaded the young doctors to go down this almost war with...
Well, they've been taken over by the far left. I mean, that's the reality. It's the same as the National Education Union for teachers. They're not there representing the best interests of teachers, or the BMA representing the best interests of doctors. They are a far left organisation. I mean, they wanted to take down a Tory government. Now they want to, take on this government. But isn't one of the issues that the government has brought a lot of this on themselves? Because Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, and Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, when they were in opposition, they were saying, look, if only the Health Secretary and the PM would come to the table, talk to the BMA, have a conversation, we can resolve this. We can resolve this really quickly. And within weeks of getting into power, in last July. No, absolutely, they resolved it. But they resolved it, as they did with the train driver strike, by throwing huge sums of money and basically giving them everything they ask, and then saying, right, all settle, it all go away. Within one day, they said, we're going to be coming back for more. And all the other public sector unions are going, hold on a minute, how come the doctors got that much and we didn't? I mean, you could have predicted every single minute of this strike.
I think the only way to deal with the situation long term is to make a strike-free NHS. You have to sign up not to strike, just as you do in the police or the military.
And would that be reasonable?
It's not unreasonable to do that.
You think that would be a reasonable request?
I think it could be introduced. I think people would take it, and this business of what constitutes an emergency. And I'm an oncologist. I do cancer. So some of the times the BMA turned down the doctor going forward, saying, "Look, it's the hospital said it's an emergency to get these biopsies done on a prostate patient at Milton Keynes. It was last week." And the BMA said, no, it's not urgent, it's routine.
It doesn't have to be done in the next 5 days. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not routine. If someone's got cancer, they need to know as quickly as possible, so you get on with treatment. The target is 62 days for diagnosis to treatment already, and that's ridiculous. I mean, in Poland, it's 7 days, but that's the NHS target. So let's stick with that.
And by the way, not always met.
Exactly. And so you're just delaying it further. And imagine the psychological problem someone has, knowing they may well have cancer, and you're just waiting because these people are on strike.
And we also know that problem happens all the time, even incompetent local hospitals or doctors. I mean, what is extraordinary is that that's for you to get the results before you then see a consultant, before you can then start treatment. And we know that virtually, I think it's every 2 weeks that you wait, your chances of dying go up.
Exactly. And I think what we have to do is to get everybody back to the table. But it's so far apart now, both sides. And the music coming out of Wes Streeting is not as it was just 1 week ago. It's pretty pugilistic, I would say. He's fed up with it. And
but I
not
can
just
understand
him, but
why.
the negotiators.
But again, if you just give them everything they want, don't be surprised when they think, hey, maybe that worked last time, it'll work again. Carol Sikora, always so good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Tom Slater, I mean, Labour just brought this on themselves, didn't they?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, anyone could see this coming. And what I'm more surprised by is the fact that the BMA can't read the room at this point. Any kind of sympathy for them, even just in the public at large, but even you kind of detect within the NHS has sort of evaporated for them. Either it's kind of doctors of an older vintage who don't really understand how willing they are to take this kind of measure given the effect it will have, but also nurses, porters, other people who are thinking, you know what, you've done all right out of this so far, and yet to keep pushing.
They're the ones who've done 7 years of training to even get to the point of being a resident doctor. I don't have an issue with doctors being paid well. I don't. I'm sorry. I think the doctors should be paid well.
You've got to read the room, though, especially when you're in a public sector.
Absolutely.
Not least one that's so racked with problems at the moment.
Absolutely. And maybe again, the West Streeting should have required extra shifts or extra work for doing this. I mean, doctors largely have been doing less and less work for higher pay over the last 20, 30 years, whether it's GPs or resident doctors or others. 11:44 is the time. Up next, going to take a break, and then we're going to be hearing from Richard Tice. He's the Deputy Leader of Reform UK. He's going to be speaking just actually after Nigel Farage has made his first public comments about what the Cabinet Minister, Peter Kyle, said about him on Sky News this morning. He basically criticised Nigel Farage for saying he wants to scrap the Online Safety Act, which came into force this week. He says that he's on the side of Jimmy Savile and other predators. He was given plenty of opportunities to sort of row that back. He decided to double down. He's even written a tweet making it very clear that's what he thinks. Nigel Farage has called his comments disgusting and below the belt and has demanded an apology. But is he likely to get it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
But as Donald Trump says, the sort of the key to being successful when you're in office is addressing those key concerns that the public have, and they are at the moment. They are immigration, they are the cost of living crisis and the economy, and dealing with the NHS. Now, there's a lot on the Prime Minister's plate, but they're the 2 or 3 things that the Prime Minister really has to get on top of.
Well, he really does, and he seems once again to be burying his head in the sand.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, joined now by Deputy Leader of Reform UK, that's Richard Tice. A very good morning to you.
Well, it's morning. I'm not sure it's a good morning based on the sort of disgraceful smears and comments from Peter Kyle, who seems to have lost the recess plot.
Well, let's just tell people about this. I was watching a clip of this. Peter Kyle, the Secretary, Science and Technology Secretary, he was on Sky News this morning, and he was talking about the Online Safety Act, and lots of people pointing out that Online Safety Act issues over censorship for adults. It's supposed to protect children, but everyone's just getting their VPN, their virtual private network, and they're bypassing it, in which case it's pointless. Nigel Farage, your party, you've said you will scrap the Online Safety Act if you come into power. Now, asked about this, Peter Kyle said, we have people out there who are extreme pornographers, peddling hate, peddling violence. Nigel Farage is on their side. He continued, make no mistake about it. If people like Jimmy Savile were alive today, he'd be perpetrating his crimes online. And Nigel Farage is saying that he's on their side. Now, he's repeatedly asked about this by the host to sort of, was that actually what he meant? And he doubled down on it. He then wrote a tweet on X saying, if you want to overturn the Online Safety Act, you're on the side of predators. It's as simple as that. Reform UK leader, your boss, Nigel Farage, has said these words were absolutely disgusting and below the belt and has demanded an apology. What's your reaction?
It is disgusting, below the belt, and he should apologise. And isn't it interesting? Do you remember when Boris Johnson, at the dispatch box, accused Keir Starmer of leading as DPP, when he was leader of the CPS? He was there, of course, when Jimmy Savile potentially could have been prosecuted and wasn't. And the Labour Party went completely tonto and demanded that Boris Johnson apologise. And now here we are, all of a sudden, when the boot's on the other foot, Peter Kyle, I don't know what's taken possession of him, but to use the hideous pedo Jimmy Savile as a political tool is just... It is the lowest of the lows. It shows how desperate the Labour Party are, how much panic they are in. They can't beat us through normal argument and policy, so they're now resorting to this. It'll backfire against them, but it's just not where we should be going in the way of debating things.
But again, I think this ties in completely with a lot of the criticisms that the Labour Party give of anything that Nigel Farage says. You just shout far right, shout racist, shout bigot, compared to a paedophile, when Nigel Farage is often, in these cases, pointing out facts, pointing out the reality, whether it's about channel migrants, whether it's about, talking about, protests at hotels and the risk of outcry. Southport, we'll come into that in a moment, the anniversary of the horrific Southport attacks 1 year on. But he's actually often pointing out facts, and then you just, and this is what Labour does. They just shout, whether it's Nigel Farage or any other ordinary person, if they disagree with them, you just call them names. But it's just not going to wash anymore, is it?
I'm surprised they haven't learned that actually the more they call us racists and bigots, the more we seem to go up in the polls. So if they add pedo to that, well, maybe we'll be trading at 40% in a few weeks' time. Who knows? I mean, the whole thing's just ridiculous. The British people have seen enough, heard enough, and are raging at the state of the country. I just think sometimes we can all make mistakes, and Peter Kyle should just realise he got out of bed the wrong side this morning. Just apologise. He got it badly
But also, I mean, look, I disagree with the Online Safety Act. Many people in this country disapprove of the Online Safety Act. It's supposed to be protecting children. I would like children to be protected from online porn. I'd like everybody to be protected from the sort of violent online porn that exists now on the internet. And lots of people are completely, blissfully unaware of how horrific and violent. And it's incest, it's rape, it's violent. It is really nasty stuff.
And here's the point.
But this doesn't protect them.
Not at all. And four out of 5 of the most downloaded apps at the moment are virtual private networks, VPNs, which enable people to go onto the dark web where there is just the most vile, horrific content that would truly
but you don't need to go onto
Richard,
you don't need to. You literally need to put the word porn into Google and look at the first page of each of those websites to see how horrific this stuff is. And I really think that people should do that so they know what is actually going on. But the reality is you can't protect children without requiring adults to identify themselves. And we've already seen censorship, haven't we, of things like some of the protests outside of migrant hotels online.
And so it's not just legislation, actually. The good news, Julia, is there is new tech coming out imminently from companies. For example, a piece of software that will prevent a pornographic image at the split second before it goes onto your mobile phone screen or iPad screen, it will block it out. That's a great piece of software.
Yeah.
Coming out very shortly. There are mobile phones that are emerging where the parents have to approve every single app that is downloaded. So I think parental demand for tech that protects children will be the faster and better and more effective way. Of course, there's a place for legislation, but it's not the only answer.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm more excited by the tech solutions than anything else
that might actually work. Although the main thing is maybe people need to stop giving mobile phones to their primary school age children as a number one thing, but there we are. Can I ask you about Donald Trump? We had Prime Minister with Donald Trump yesterday, one of those interminable press conferences, which are basically just Donald Trump meandering along. But he gave some advice to Keir Starmer. Let's have a quick listen to what he had to say.
Generally speaking, the one who cuts taxes the most, the one who gives you the lowest energy prices and the best kind of energy, the one that keeps you out of wars. He's kept you out of wars. And in your case, a big immigration component, because I know that your attitude has become strong on immigration, strong on the toughness of immigration.
No, I'm not quite sure where Trump got the idea that Keir Starmer was tough on the issue of immigration, but this was his advice: stop the bets, cut taxes, keep out of wars and lower energy prices. Do you think Keir Starmer is going to take that advice? And if he does, would it help him beat Nigel Farage at the next election?
Well, it was funny hearing Donald Trump talk about energy. There was no energy, and Keir Starmer slumped in his seat there, just wishing the whole thing would come to a rapid end. There was another thing that he said, which is wind is a con. Windmills are a con, he said, and he's absolutely right. I mean, it's old technology from a couple of hundred years ago. It's bonkers. It drives up energy prices, and he's completely right. Look, the bottom line is that the voters will vote for someone that they believe is going to be strong on immigration, protect our borders, stop the boats, and has the right economic answers to make people better off and get some growth again. And that, I think, is why we're leading in the polls, because people trust us more than energy, and we tell the truth than everybody else, and we tell the truth about net stupid zero.
Well, you're ahead of the cause on that, certainly. Can I ask you also, on a different note, today is the first anniversary of the Southport attack, in which 3 little girls died, 8 others were stabbed, some life-changing injuries, 2 adults as well. Obviously, Axel Rudakabana behind bars now for many, many years. Not for life. We still find that extraordinary. I don't care whether he was under 18 or not when he committed those crimes. Known to the authorities, as always, these people always are, but nothing was done to actually make sure that he was not able to commit such heinous crimes. And then, of course, we had the post-Southport riots as well. And then we had people who right now, Lucy Connolly and others, in prison right now, not for taking part in riots, but for writing posts online. Your thoughts today?
Well, in a sense, I'd actually rather not think about it, because the whole thing is just too horrific at any day. But I think that have we in the sort of the political world, are the lessons being learned? Are the processes being put in place to prevent a future horror? Frankly, I'm not sure they are. I think what we're seeing is a failure of police leadership and a failure of the main political class, the government, to recognise people's deep anxiety about the state of illegal immigration, the failure to process people and remove people who shouldn't be here, and the high levels of legal immigration and the impact that's having on our society at every level is truly shocking, and the cost as well. And the cost of illegal immigration, the cost of legal immigration, suppressing British wages, impacting on public services, impacting on vast benefit claims, £1 billion a month from foreign nationals claiming benefits. Well, if foreign nationals are coming here to work, that's the reason for immigration, then why should they claim any benefits at all? Either work or, frankly, go home.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you joining us, Richard Tyson, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Well, Tom Slater's still listening to that. Understandably, going back to those comments from Peter Kyle, the Cabinet Minister, about Nigel Farage, understandably angry about that. But do you think he's right, though, that it will actually backfire and that actually just sort of making stupid... I mean, it was a stupid thing to say. Yeah. It was a dumb thing to say, and he's doubled down on it. He was given plenty of opportunities on that Sky interview to sort of back to, no, you're not actually saying that. No, I am. You're not actually saying that, and then doubling down on it on social media afterwards.
And I think it already has backfired. I think the story on all the news bulletins this morning where this is concerned is not Nigel Farage is siding with Jimmy Savile, says Labour Minister. It's Labour Minister smears Nigel Farage and Reform. That's how it's being taken. That's how it's being understood. And what I think was telling about it was that he'd clearly gone into that interview intending to say that, and he may well have been told to say that. So another sign of terrible political judgment right up to the top of the Labour Party.
Absolutely. Well, again, as Richard Price points out, you know, just calling us names doesn't seem to be working so far, does it? I think it's just a debasement of proper debate. And again, I support the Online Safety Act being scrapped. Does that mean I'm a supporter of the paedophile Jimmy Savile? I mean, it's just an absurd thing to say, isn't it? So much more coming up. Up next, going to talk to Andrew Fox. He's been out in Gaza. Talk to us live from Tel Aviv. Up next, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Indeed. Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very good afternoon to you. Whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's always great to have your company. Lots more to talk about, and with you all the way till 1 o'clock. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, also joining me throughout the show. Don't forget, if you've missed anything on the show, you can go to my YouTube page. We've called it The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show to make it easy to find. You can hit subscribe and you will never miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we are going to be talking about Keir Starmer hosting that emergency cabinet meeting this afternoon to discuss the crisis in Gaza with his ministers. This amid mounting pressure from more and more Labour MPs to recognise a Palestinian state, to follow the Spanish, the Irish and more recently Emmanuel Macron's French government recognising a Palestinian state. But what does that actually mean, and what message would it send to, well, everyone in the Middle East, particularly Hamas? Plus, Donald Trump said there was real starvation in Gaza, and he's called on Israel to allow every ounce of food into the region. Well, up next, we're going to be talking to Andrew Fox, who's been in Gaza yesterday to find out what life is like on the ground. Plus, Donald Trump has presented a new shorter deadline for Russia to agree to a ceasefire over the war in Ukraine of 10 to 12 days. So that's from Monday. There was 35 days remaining of the 50-day deadline he'd given previously, but he said there was no reason to wait any longer as no progress towards peace has been made. Also, we're going to talk about the more than 600,000 graduates who are claiming benefits. That's according to new figures from the Office for National Statistics. So how are those degrees working out for you, everybody? And we're going to talk more about the Online Safety Act, because VPN apps, virtual private networks, which disguise your identity and your location, have become the most downloaded on the App Store in the UK after age verification checks kicked in on sites like Pornhub, Reddit and X. By the way, X is a social media site, not a porn site, due to the online safety bill coming into effect. We're going to be talking more about that in the next hour as well. Right now, though, let me come back to Tom Slater. Tom, just before we get to our guest, Andrew Fox, talking about this cabinet meeting the government is having. It's an emergency cabinet meeting. People recall some ministers will be abroad because of summer recess, and they will, or their constituencies, and they will be taking part online. What is the purpose of having this meeting? What is the point of this meeting? I mean, it's not entirely clear, is it? I mean, they're clearly keen to sort of try and seize back some of the initiatives, some of the agenda. They've been flailing around on all kinds of issues, but obviously Keir Starmer's quite keen to kind of pivot back towards international affairs at the same time. But as with so many things that happen with this government, it seems to be largely about trying to always reset the kind of public image rather than to actually do anything of substance. Do we really think they're going to crack this issue in this cabinet meeting today? I mean, I definitely think, if anyone's going to crack the conundrum and the issues and all the ongoing years of many, many, many decades, even centuries in the Middle East, I think Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner is definitely the person. The combined brain power of Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, Lisa Nandy, Peter Carr, get them together. Tick. Yeah. Sorted, all sorted. I mean, Peter Carr could just call them names like he did, Nigel Farage. But there we are. Let's talk to Andrew Fox about this. He's not just a defence expert and research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. He's live for us right now from Tel Aviv in Israel after spending the day in Gaza yesterday as an independent witness to what is going on the ground. A very good afternoon to you, Andrew.
Well, shalom from Tel Aviv, Julia.
Thank you very much. Right, so much to talk to you about. Let's start with what you did in Gaza yesterday. Who were you with? How did you go in? Because we've seen, the likes of Jeremy Byrne of the BBC saying we've been allowed to watch, go inside planes dropping food aid to people in Gaza. We're not even allowed to film the land underneath. But you've been allowed to go in. Who were you with and what did you see?
So I didn't have anything to do with the IDF yesterday, who do indeed keep a very strict control on what you can film. I was with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is the US-Israeli non-governmental organisation who are running the protected aid delivery sites in the south of Gaza.
OK. Now, this is the second time you've got into Gaza with them. And last time you were saying, look, you were not seeing anything like the chaos that we were hearing about in the media at the time. I've seen some of your social media tweets talking about, look, we really are looking at people suffering from severe hunger. What did you see on the ground? What has changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had 21 months of crying wolf, but we are now reaching the point where the situation is worsening. I mean, the people I saw yesterday, they were obviously rushing to get the aid. They were very keen, almost desperate for it. They were slim but not emaciated. The American contractors on the ground told me that people's cheeks had started filling out over the weeks since they've been there. So they have averted, certainly in that particular part of Gaza, they've averted the worst of the hunger. But as ever with this war, the issue is with distribution. And that's one of the things I just don't understand about the narrative that's around this. The GHF are doing good work. People are getting fed. People were happy, smiling. Some of the little girls were even having a little dance. The aid has gone in. You can look at it yourself on the UN website or in the COGAT website. Like, there is double the aid gone in during the war as went in before the war when there was no starvation. So the aid is in there, and the issue is getting it to people. And there's a number.
Where is it if it's there? I mean, it didn't go in for. I mean, double the aid may have gone in on certain weeks and days or months, but there were long periods when there wasn't aid going in.
There were, but in cumulative totals, the periods when aid wasn't going in was preceded by a period when about 6 months worth of aid went in.
Right.
I don't agree that the Israelis should have stopped the aid at all. They know what's happening on the ground. They know how difficult that distribution is, and they should have known.
So what? Okay, but what's stopping the distribution? Because there was criticism that there were aid agencies that basically say, "Oh no, we won't work. We won't work with this organisation. We think this is a war crime, forcing people to go to the south of the country to get food. It's when we won't be a part of it." And then there was revelations that there's all this aid sitting there, and they refused to distribute it. Is it? I mean, before we had these sort of these corridors where there and protected corridors, and 10 hours at a time when it was safe for aid agencies to go in to distribute. Was it possible for them to go in and distribute?
Yeah, and that's been part of the problem, because as soon as that was exposed to the world, they picked it up and shifted it. So I was there yesterday, and all that aid that was backed up 2 days ago is now gone. So they can move it when they want to. So that's the first really important thing to note. Second thing to note is that aid has been flowing into North Gaza through these agencies. The GHF don't operate up there. So it's all been aid agencies taking aid into North Gaza. So the idea that somehow Israel is blockading the aid or stopping the aid getting in is just a nonsense.
I've got to be honest with you. I mean, I follow news very, very closely. I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting.
It's just not being reported. On top of that, you do have Hamas have been seizing it. That's unquestioned. There is no doubt that Hamas have been nicking the aid and stockpiling it. There are areas where.
And why do Hamas do that? We've heard about them taking the aid and selling it because that's how they fund themselves. But what is the purpose of them stockpiling it?
Because it causes a humanitarian crisis. That's kind of their design. Because the more humanitarian crisis they can cause, the more they can hit Israel on the international stage, which is exactly what they've been doing. So, it's not as if they're fighting for Gaza's people here. They're fighting for themselves and nobody else. And so the suffering and misery they inflict on others, it doesn't matter at all. And as with ever, rich families are doing okay. Poor families are the ones who don't have the money to buy stuff because inflation booms. When prices go up due to scarcity, then they're even less likely to be able to eat. So there's all kinds of socioeconomic factors that play out here, just as it does in non-wartime conditions.
Yeah.
So it's a real mess of a situation.
Yeah, I mean, and it is a mess, and there's no doubt at all. But I mean, a lot of these people are displaced. They may have been able to fend for themselves previously, but they're away from their homes. Their homes have been bombed, and they are displaced. In terms of the pressure that's on Israel right now, there's no doubt at all that Donald Trump has kind of changed his mind a bit. There's more pressure. He said in that press conference with Keir Starmer yesterday, look, you can see the hunger is real right now. We have seen images of very emaciated children. I know some of those have been debunked as propaganda. These are children. I mean, there's one child that has actually been in the in I can't remember which country, but they've certainly been flown in somewhere in Europe. I mean, I think you've pointed some of these out. But go through some of those cases where there are children who are hungry. There will be children in particular who are afflicted by malnutrition much sooner than adults, and people who will be dying as a result of this. But in terms of some of the propaganda images that have come out, of emaciated children, which absolutely tug at your heartstrings. I'm a mum, I don't want to see any child like that. But some of these images are dishonest at best.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, particularly the one the Express used, which was the child you alluded to. I think it was it cerebral palsy, I think he had, and he was in hospital in Italy.
And has been for some months, but it was the image of starvation in Gaza this week.
Yeah, exactly that. And so they've done this time and time again. And it's worrying for me because, look, if it's that bad, everyone in Gaza has a cell phone. People are not short of the ability to take pictures or even send pictures. There's a good phone signal in there. And it concerns me that people have just been suckered yet again by the Hamas propaganda machine that's sort of pushed by Qatar and various other actors around the world. The online bot activity at the moment is off the charts on this stuff.
Well, you say suckered. Look, it's one thing people being suckered who don't have any knowledge about this. I mean, suddenly people who they were all worried about climate change and trans, and now suddenly their latest cause is Palestine. It's just the latest fashionable left-wing cause, and that is what happens a lot of the time in this. But what about the BBC journalists, the Sky journalists, the ITV journalists who have long experienced war correspondence? Are they being suckered?
Well, clearly they are. I mean, Jeremy Bowen just this week published an interview with the GHF alleged whistleblower, and I was exposed to some of his former colleagues yesterday who had some very robust things to say.
And this was a whistleblower saying what?
I was saying that the Israelis were massacring stuff and that they were firing tank rounds into cars, and that they hadn't even zeroed their weapons. And it's nonsense. It is absolute nonsense. And the guys I saw yesterday were all former US Special Forces operators. They're exactly the guys that I worked with in Afghanistan. It's the same attitude, that quiet professionalism. They really cared about the people on the ground. They were binding children's feet. They were holding their hands. They were going out of their way to help people. These are good people. And this guy had been sacked for repeated misconduct. He begged repeatedly for his job back and had sent threats that he would go and throw them under a bus if they didn't give him his job back. And yet Jeremy Bowen has just platformed this guy without verifying anything that he was saying. So the BBC yet again is pushing out naked propaganda.
But again, they've been using sources. They've even been using reporters and online correspondents, on-air correspondents, who have been blatantly, corrupted by Hamas, who've celebrated the October 7th attacks. I mean, not just sort of nuances, but I mean, absolutely celebrated the horrific events of October the 7th. Is the answer to all of this to allow foreign journalists, independent journalists, into Gaza? And if not, why not?
Well, I still don't think so. I still think it's too dangerous. I still think that if a journalist was killed, that would always be blamed on Israel, whether it was Israel or not.
Or taken hostage.
Yep, or taken hostage, or, as happened in 2014, and there's news reports about this, they would be threatened by Hamas and told what they could and couldn't publish. So I think it's a lose-lose situation.
But honestly, shouldn't that be up to those individual journalists or their insurance companies for their organisations to make that decision? Is it the norm in wartime? Say when we were in Iraq or Afghanistan, that journalists would be banned from entering?
Well, not banned from entering. They just have to be escorted, and that's the difference. And we absolutely do that. That's every place that goes to war pretty much in the world. Ukraine, you can't just go up to the front line as a journalist. If you flashed your NUJ membership card and tried to get to the front line, you'd be absolutely stopped by the Ukrainians.
Right.
And it's the same in Israel. And yet again, it's double standards applying to Israel that don't apply to the rest of the world.
As we keep seeing. Well, look, we've got this cabinet meeting, the Prime Minister today, and one of the things he's going to discuss is whether or not there should be recognition of a Palestinian state. Now, what Keir Starmer has been saying is this: he wants to be on the roadmap towards recognising a Palestinian state. We've had Emmanuel Macron, France joining the Spanish, the Irish and others in recognising a Palestinian state. What does recognising a Palestinian state mean, and what does it achieve?
Well, it achieves very little. It's a good way to virtue signal, but it doesn't really go a great deal beyond that because, ultimately Israel have to agree because they're the sort of the power in the region, and they have the control over this situation.
Well, have they not agreed on many occasions in the past for there to be a two-state solution? But we know there's some hardliners in Netanyahu's cabinet who are totally opposed to that.
Yeah, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and those other lunatics who are doing more to hurt Israel than Hamas are, quite frankly. These are not good people, and they're not saying things that any respectable politician should say. The issue, I think, with the Israeli piece is that they offered the last deal that was on the table and Arafat walked away from was 96% of the West Bank with a compensatory 4% of Israeli territory to make up for the 4%, and they turned that down. And look, until the issue of the river to the sea goes away, what we call Palestinianism, which is, i.e., getting rid of Israel completely and it all being Palestine. Until they give up on that idea, you're never going to have a two-state solution. And, it's great that Mr. Macron and Mr. Starmer think that they can solve this decades-old problem. But until you deal with the fact that there are two people who want completely different things in the negotiating room, being Israel and the Palestinians, there is no middle ground here.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the Palestinian leaders, you could start the West Bank is ruled by Palestinian Authority, is sort of Fatah influenced, the complete, enemy of Hamas, who are ruling Gaza. Even Keir Starmer has said, look, there could be no Palestinian state with Hamas in ruling. But I mean, who's going to oust Hamas other than, oh, by the way, the Israelis, which is what they've been trying to do. But the reality is you've got two bits of land. They're not even joined, with two different sets of rulers, neither of which has held an election in 20 years. It seems to me there is no statehood to recognise, is there?
No, I agree. And, there's no path forward to statehood at the moment. You are fundamentally dealing with extremists and, on both sides, actually. There are those extremists in the Israeli cabinet who are pushing the illegal settlements, who are declaring that there will never be a two-state solution. Yeah. And, there's also the Palestinian Authority who are paying their people to kill Jews. And when they go to jail, they compensate them handsomely, which is clearly far worse than just saying awful things. So, it's a mess. And, the vanity that the UK can map out a roadmap. I think our days as a country of dictating lines on a map in the Middle East may well be over. And Mr. Starmer would do well just to stop wasting his time and focus on the many domestic issues that we have that require his attention.
Indeed, a lot of people might be thinking that. Thank you very much. Really interesting to talk to you. Andrew Fox there, defence expert, ex-military himself, now research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, live for us in Tel Aviv, in Israel, having spent the day in Gaza yesterday with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. What do you take out from that interview?
No, just the sheer vanity, as Andrew was describing it there, of Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron. I mean, it would be one thing if they genuinely thought that they were about to crack the world's most intractable conflict, but you can't help but suspect there's another motivation here, which is just to distract, which is just to play to a domestic political audience, whether that's within their own coalition or within the country at large and the seats that they're concerned about shoring up in Keir Starmer's case. And what a horrendous way to treat what an incredibly serious conflict as something which is just a domestic political football rather than something that needs to be taken on its own terms. But also, it's not going to work.
No, it's not going to work.
People aren't listening.
You're basically rewarding Hamas for what they've done on October 7th and what they've done since, while they're still holding hostages, to talk about this, to say, well, Hamas can't be judged. Well, then who's ruling Gaza? Last time they had an election, Hamas was elected. That was back in 2005. There hasn't been one since. But I don't know what they're recognising. And for me, it's the fact that what's happening in Gaza is directing our foreign policy, is affecting what happens in our domestic politics. That influence is that, and again, that is a post-mass immigration influence of a large number of Muslim people in this country, and also the alliance with the far left and the Muslim leadership, and indeed some really quite Islamist Muslim leaders in this country, as opposed to ordinary Muslims wanting to live a normal, ordinary life and have a better life for themselves and their kids. That is influencing our politics. These are the sort of things that people were warning about 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and they're happening. They're playing out. You've got people like Wes Streeting, the health secretary. He, narrowly won his seat because there was a threat from a sort of a pro-Gaza party leftist candidate, and calling for this recognition of the Palestinian state now, even while Hamas, are in charge of Gaza, and Mahmoud is in charge of the West Bank, with no democratic mandate whatsoever, having not held an election in 2 decades. And he's only doing that because of pressure from people in his own constituency. This is changing the face of British politics, and people who pointed that out, that would happen, were just called bigots and Islamophobes and goodness knows what. But there's the reality.
But it's also Labour's own horrendous politicking coming back to bite them, because yes, there's the mass immigration piece of this, but there's also the kind of multiculturalism piece of this, the way in which you had Labour very willing to kind of play the community leaders' game of chess when it came to trying to shore up their electoral votes, very willing to lean in to some of these quite divisive international issues, whether that's Israel-Palestine, whether that's Kashmir, in order to shore up their vote, really kind of treating the electorate as a series of kind of ethno-religious blocks that you try and stack on top of each other in order to get yourself over the line in an election. Tories have played that game from time to time as well in recent years, but nevertheless I think Labour in particular, in a lot of those kind of more inner city seats in which they are either have lost them or are in danger of losing them at the next election, this is the kind of politics that they happily embraced, and now it's being used against them. But
Careful what you wish for.
That was always going to take place.
Absolutely. 12:22 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Also, do get in touch about Donald Trump's advice to Keir Starmer about how to win an election. If you did stop the boats, if you did cut taxes, lowered energy prices, would you be willing to vote for Keir Starmer? Or maybe not, as most of you seem to be saying. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Hold on to your hats, because Georgina is on the line. And she's always got a message for the PM. That's coming up next. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
But as Donald Trump says, the sort of the key to being successful when you're in office is addressing those key concerns that the public have, and they are at the moment. They are immigration, they are the cost of living crisis and the economy, and dealing with the NHS. Now, there's a lot on the Prime Minister's plate, but they're the two or three things that the Prime Minister really has to get on top of.
Well, he really does, and he seems once again to be burying his head in the sand.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. It's 12:25. Let's get some of your messages coming in thick and fast about Donald Trump's advice to Keir Starmer about cutting taxes, stopping the boats if he wants to beat Nigel Farage. Would that sway your vote? I've been asking you. Well, John says LIBOR will never get my vote, or any of my family's votes for that matter. It needs to be more than just cutting taxes. Ollie says even Starmer knows there's only 4 years left of Labour, hence all the pushing through of these draconian policies. Fred says that Labour won't listen. He will just nod and agree and do the opposite. And Nigel, I'm assuming not Nigel Farage, but Nigel says he lost the trust of the majority of the great British public the first month he became PM. Ain't that the truth? And Anthony says, why is Trump dictating to us? He should focus on his own failing, farcical administration. Well, to be fair, he wasn't dictating. He was asked by a reporter, and he said, I don't normally meddle in domestic affairs. I mean, he does. He does. They all do. But then went on to meddle. He was just saying what he would do. Stanley says, Keir and Nigel are the same. Nobody in this current system can change anything. And Lee says, no, it will not sway my vote. I'm done with them. Reform for me. Let's give them a try. They can't possibly do any worse. Right, let's hit the phone lines. Georgia, as I say, Georgina, apologies, is on the line in London. Georgina, good afternoon to you. Wait for it. What do you want to say?
Darling. Good afternoon, darling. Good afternoon, Mr. Tom Slater. I've not had the pleasure, so here we go.
Well, there you are, then.
I watched Keir Starmer, and I've got to say, totally disgusted with him, as always. He makes John Major look positively effervescent. The only time I saw any automation with this chap is when Trump mentioned freedom of speech, illegal migration, and Sadiq Khan. Then he seemed to show some signs of life.
We've got freedom of speech, he said, and he's my mate. Yeah.
Oh, come on, Julia. I don't know how Starmer can stand there or sit there or whatever he does and blatantly lie through his teeth, knowing that Trump will know exactly what's going on in the UK. Not that Trump's any better. Starmer's a fool to think to the contrary. And as soon as Trump leaves, it'll be business as usual for Keir Starmer. Carry on with the cultural and financial dismantling of Britain. If this gets any worse, Julia, I'm going to stand for PM myself, and you could be my right-hand woman.
Listen, we've all been saying here, we want you to stand. I would vote for you hands down, Georgina, and I would love to see you in one of those press conferences with Trump or any negotiations with the EU. I would pay such good money for that.
Well, you know what? I think that we could do a better job. At least we know what's going on in the country. We know what taxes are.
Absolutely. I wouldn't trust this lot to run a bath.
Well, they couldn't. Do you know what, Julia? I wouldn't trust them with a house plant. I really wouldn't. Because, you'd come home in a week and it'd be dead. It's a total disbarkle. They need to get their act together. I listened to Kemi Badenoch this morning, and honestly, the girl is not fit for purpose. I was a Conservative for over 40 years. 40 years of being a Conservative, and after Boris Johnson, that was the end for me. I'm now Reform, but if they can't do the job, I hope they can. I'm praying they can. We have got to do something. Yep. We have got to do something quickly, because this country is going to the dogs.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Georgina, thank you. It's just brilliant. I say I vote for you 20 times a day quite happily. It ties in, Thomas Slater, with a poll we've just been given by the Adam Smith Insights from the Adam Smith Institute, a poll finding that young Brits are anxious about their financial prospects, and many are considering leaving the country altogether. This is 18 to 30-year-olds, really concerned about housing, understandable, personal finances, a future in the UK, and over a quarter have seriously considered or are actively planning to leave the country. Now, realistically, that many wouldn't leave the country, but I'm really worried that our brightest and best are going to feel that they haven't got a future here, and then we really are in deep doo-doo.
No, absolutely. And it's partly about the existing conditions, whether that's the economy, whether that's housing and what have you, but also the sense that we're going anywhere, that there's a plan, that there's some sort of brighter future on the horizon, even if we're going through a bit of a rocky patch here. There's none of that in politics at the moment. I think there's no one who can really feel like they're offering credible answers for the here and now, but also where we're supposed to be going. That's a big part of the puzzle here, I think, in terms of keeping the sorts of people that you want to keep in the country.
Absolutely. It's really, really important in terms of our future. Absolutely. Let's go to another phone line. Khalid is in Leicester. And Khalid, I'm not surprised you want to have your say on what's going on in Gaza, don't you?
Of course, Julia.
Good morning to you. Afternoon to you. What are you going to say?
Well, the thing is, we know exactly what is going on. The whole world knows. The majority, 99.99% of the world knows that Israel is carrying out. They're carrying out the Plan Dalet. This has been documented from 1948. Plan Dalet. Have you never heard of that? You should do your research first. Julia.
No. I've heard the word. I don't know what you mean by it.
What that means, basically, Israel has had this, and it's documented. It's not just me saying something pie in the sky. It is documented. Plan Dalet. Basically, the gist of what that whole plan is to take over parts of Syria, parts of Lebanon, parts of Iraq, parts of Libya. This has been their plan,
right?
And from 1948. Now, how did they do that? They all this propaganda which you are regurgitating as well, right? From Israel is to facilitate this through the media, through the governments, to facilitate this, and this is what they are doing now.
How's it working out for them so far? Because, I mean, they've been constantly criticised by everybody, everyone in the media, most, even their allies criticised them. This is not working out very well for them. I mean, given that they're supposed to be in control of everything, you know, they're not doing it very well, are they?
Well, anyone with any human being with a heart will criticise them, because people do, other humans do care for genuine human beings do care for other human beings.
Do. Which is why we're talking constantly about what's happening in Gaza, but no one's talking about what's going on in Sudan.
Of course, people are talking about what's going on in Sudan.
No, it's not front page news every day. It's not brought up at press conferences. No, it's not. Most people in this country have no idea what's going on in Sudan because it's not on the news.
No, but the UK is not supporting the atrocities that are happening in Sudan. The UK is supporting Israel carrying out these atrocities. And UK nationals are going to Gaza to carry out acts of atrocity and coming back to the UK. British nationals. This is a. You
mean Israeli British dual nationalities who are conscripted to the Israeli army?
Yes, so therefore, if that's a principle you base your condition on, then that means that Russian dual nationality, British Russian nationalities can go to Russia and fight against the Ukrainians. Then, you know, so this is a hypocrisy, double standards. This is what is appalling, Julia. You cannot have one rule for one rule for another. Ukraine
isn't ruled by a genocidal terrorist group that was basically saying they want the end, the annihilation of the Russian people and invaded Russia. It's rather different.
Julia,
it's a really, I mean, come on, it's just a nonsense comparison, Khalid.
Julia, give me a minute.
You don't have to talk nonsense the whole time, I have to say.
Listen, even before Hamas were in existence, everybody knows this killings and expulsion has been carrying on since 1948.
Expulsion of who? Expulsion of who?
Sorry?
Expulsion of who?
Expulsion of the Palestinians.
So you're not aware that Jews were expelled from pretty much every Arab state that were expelled. You weren't aware of that. But is that okay? You can expel Jews.
They weren't expelled.
Yes, they were. No, they literally were.
They weren't expelled from Palestine, were they?
They've been literally expelled from. Every single Jew left Gaza. They left Gaza. Gaza was left to its own, get on with it in 2006. Chose to get on with it by building tunnels and preparing weaponry, firing on Israel and planning a massacre.
So the solution is to massacre the whole of the population?
The solution is to take out Hamas. Yeah, the solution is to take out, as we would do, if any terrorist organisation or any country run by a terrorist organisation attacked us in the same way, we would be doing exactly the same. In fact, we'd be killing more civilians than Israel is doing as a proportion, because that's what we've always done.
That's pathetic propaganda, Julia.
You know that. You know as well as I do. I would require my government to act like that.
No, you know as well as I do. They've been killing the Palestinians from 1948 onwards. So you cannot. Hamas is a reaction to all the decades of brutality.
Always the victims. Always the victims. I'm going to have to leave it. I mean, only because I'm going to leave it because we're out of time, but also I'm just bored with the nonsense that you spout. I really am, Khalid. I really am. I'm sorry. Although he didn't mention the genocide word, unusually using it incorrectly this time, so that's good. 12:34 is the time. Up next, we are going to be talking about benefits. Britain, more than 600,000 graduates claiming benefits in this country. Why are they claiming benefits? Are there no jobs out there? Or are these the ones who are just on the sick benefits because apparently they're too anxious to go to work? We'll talk about that up next. Plus the 1 in 4 young Brits who could leave the country. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. 12:37 is the time. Let's talk about benefits Britain. More than 600,000 graduates are now claiming benefits. This also comes as a new poll suggests that 1 in 4 young Brits could leave the country because they just don't feel they've got a future here, can't afford to buy a home, worried about their finances, don't feel this as a country is going anywhere. Well, let's talk about all of this with Maxwell Marlowe, who's Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. Very, very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. I'm obviously doing better than an awful lot of these young Brits who are 18 to 30-year-olds and others who are, frankly, feeling rather despondent. Let's talk first of all about the the 600,000 graduates who are claiming benefits. Now, I didn't find the job I wanted straight after uni, but I didn't claim benefits. I worked as a waitress, I worked as a temp secretary. I did every job I had to do to scrape by with my rent and pay some of the debts off. But these are people who've gone to university, they've got a load of debt, they've got a degree, a piece of paper they assumed was worth something, and now they're not working. Are they all on the dole or are they on sickness benefits? What are they doing?
Yeah, so a lot of these young people are on the dole, actually. You know, they can't find work. And, you know, it's all very, really good to say, you know, benefits Britain, they're being lazy. There is an element of that, don't get me wrong. But actually what this actually speaks to is the massive increase in employers' national insurance that has been striking a lot of those low-paid work. I mean, you just said, Julia, you know, you were a waitress when you couldn't find a job. When I was at school, I worked behind a bar, I worked in a hotel. I know for a fact now that a lot of hospitality businesses are shuttering at record rates. Yeah. Because they can't afford to employ these staff.
So a lot of the jobs that they would be doing, they're not getting. And one of the other issues I found out in a previous incarnation at another station, talking to people who were saying, you know, I'm 26, 27, I can't get a job. And a lot of them be young people saying, well, I've got a degree and I don't see why I should work as a waiter or work in a bar or work in a sandwich shop. I've got a qualification. And what they've got is a 2-2 in media studies from a former polytechnic, and they've been sold the lie that is going to be worthwhile to any future employer. Brackets. It's not, close brackets. But they think, but I'm a graduate. I'm too good to do those jobs. I don't have to do those jobs. There are a lot of young people who don't understand that any job is better than no job, and that you need to start at the bottom. And yes, you know, sometimes you will just be making people tea and doing some more menial tasks before you move on in your career.
Yeah, totally. I mean, let's look at some of the degrees that people are getting from these Mickey Mouse degrees. A lot of people could say photography, for example, that's one that is the lowest paying coming out. I mean, data from Adzuna, which is an aggregate of a lot of these degrees, £23,000 a year after graduation. It's nothing basically. And
I would have dreamt I was on £9 grand on my local paper, and I know even allowing for the fact it was a different generation ago, quite a few. That's still even with inflation, way less than that.
Totally, but still, they're going to these universities. They're Mickey Mouse degrees. Yeah. They don't make much sense. The reason why, Julie, we have a lot of these third-rate universities pushing out third-rate degrees is to mask youth unemployment. Now, as soon as they graduate, they do struggle to find a job. But coming straight out of school at the age of 18, a lot of the thinking around the education slogan that Tony Blair was pushing out for so long was this entire thing. It was, we're there to mask youth unemployment because we're going to increase the regulations on employment. We're going to put in the minimum wage, which destroys these kind of low-skilled jobs. And it has been really, really detrimental to the country and to young people. So no wonder so many people are thinking of leaving.
I disagree with you on the minimum wage issue. There was lots of warnings at the time. Oh, that's going to absolutely ruin companies. If you can't pay a decent, livable wage, you're an employee. You shouldn't be employing people at all, in my view. But there does come a point, again, you put those extra taxes, lash insurance on, and you lower the threshold which is paid. Those people then do become too expensive for what they can contribute at that time. Now, you guys at the Adam Smith Institute, you've got Adam Smith Insights, looking at this. It was part of your Anxious Generation series, which I find fascinating. We've got a whole generation of young people who find life very difficult to cope with. I mean, very different to what I've got on my screens in here, these celebrations of the Lionesses outside Buckingham Palace after their victory parade, playing playing an entire tournament with a broken tibia, overcoming adversity, getting up, almost facing defeat, and the resilience, the belief in themselves. That's what we would love from a lot of our young people, but they don't feel it. Should we have sympathy for them because they've gone through lockdown, because of all the difficulties they've got, getting their chances of getting a decent job, getting on the housing ladder, having the stuff that, say, my parents certainly took for granted as automatic things? Should we be sorry for them, or do they frankly need a little bit of a shake and a wake-up slap to reality?
I think things are really, really discouraging for young people nowadays, and that's borne out by the data. Wages haven't grown since about 2008. We asked, people from across the political spectrum as well. It's not just whiny lefty students. 54% of young people who vote Conservative, are struggling to make ends meet. 49% of Reform voters are struggling to make ends meet. In that age bracket, it's difficult across the board. And we look at housing, massive housing crisis, unprecedented immigration to the system. Labour aren't doing anything about it, obviously. The government are really struggling to get those homes built. Yeah. Obviously, 65% of young people struggling to find somewhere to live. So they live with mum and dad. If they live with mum and dad, they may be well out of finding a job from somewhere. All of these issues compound. And you're right to mention lockdown as well, Julia. I know I've been on the show before, discussed it with you. It was a disgrace, and there's been no recompense for young people to deal with those problems. And now we just see this huge explosion of mental health problems. Yes or no? Is that valid? Is it not? We have seen quite a lot of it, but we've also seen a massive economic contraction. So no wonder 1 in 4 young people are looking at moving abroad, especially when you've got TikTok and you can see all these people living at large in America or the UAE or in Europe. Meanwhile, in the UK, it is broken Britain.
Although, of course, people only put on their best days on things like TikTok and Insta, don't they? The worrying thing is, in terms of the young Brits who leave, is you tend to lose your brightest and your best, your people who can get a visa to go to these countries, who would be welcomed. They've got qualifications. They feel like, I can have a better future somewhere else, and I can afford to buy a home and raise a family. We might lose a lot of people who would have been really important in our economy and in our society.
Totally, and we were really reliant for a long time on bringing more of the world's best to the UK. Look at pre-Blair, 14,000 people a year, net migration. These were top scientists, top students who'd go on to do really high-performing roles. They'd be bankers and manufacturers and innovators. And now we're losing those people. They're all going. And for young people especially, if you don't, we saw this with the football, I should say. Chloe Kelly saying, I'm proud to be British. I'm proud to have British blood in my
proud to be English. She said, I'm proud to be English.
And that's fantastic. But that's a top sports person. For most young people, they walk around the streets nowadays and they go, where's this all gone? Why should I stay here? Why should I suffer under this massive tax regime, under this government which hates me? And just nothing is working. So no wonder they're looking elsewhere. It's terrible news for Britain, for England maybe specifically, but we need to do something quickly to solve this.
Absolutely. Maxwell Marlowe, always so good to talk to you. He's Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. I think he's probably in that age bracket. I should have asked him his age. Tom Slater, you're a bit out of that age bracket now. You're a graduate. But I mean, there is I can see and feel a real sort of like, how hard do I have to work to get ahead? There used to be, if you worked hard, you could, even if you're in a couple, you could afford to buy your home, you can live somewhere, you can have a garden for your kids, have a future. People are really worried about the basics, about paying for the bills. Lots of expensive things now, people wanting to have their iPhones and their gadgets, things that cost a lot more than they used to. We didn't have those things, there's extra cost. But nevertheless, you can see why a lot of young people feel a bit despondent about, I'm just not going to have the life that my parents had or my grandparents had.
No, absolutely, and I think it goes across the different demographics as well, insofar as often this discussion is had because it's amongst media people. You think of kind of university graduates and so on and so forth, but amongst people who are leaving school, not necessarily going on to a university, working in call centres, working in shops, all the rest of it, they kind of sense that there's a pathway for those people as well has completely disappeared over many decades now. So there's this kind of bleakness across the board, and whereas previously we might have seen that more acutely in kind of working class communities where the pathway that used to exist to better employment, more meaningful employment, the ability to strike out on your own and start a family, that's long disappeared. There's even a sense amongst the middle class now that that is fast disappearing for them as well. So that's a recipe for real despondency, I think, across that generation.
People need full optimism. And again, the idea that that every generation will do better than the generation before. that is not going to be the case for a long time. But don't worry, we'll be all paying taxes to pay for our parents and grandparents and their pensions. That's the reality. I think the intergenerational debate is going to be the next really big battle in terms of our society. 12:47 is the time. We're going to take a break. Up next, we're going to be talking about that big surge in people downloading those VPNs so they can, presumably, access online porn after the online safety bill came into existence. But after the Prime Minister, after a Cabinet Minister accused Nigel Farage of being on the side of the likes of Jimmy Savile by opposing the Online Safety Act, we're going to talk to Big Brother Watch about why, well, we should all oppose it. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
But as Donald Trump says, the sort of the key to being successful when you're in office is addressing those key concerns that the public have, and they are at the moment. They are immigration, they are the cost of living crisis and the economy, and dealing with the NHS. Now, there's a lot on the Prime Minister's plate, but they're the two or three things that the Prime Minister really has to get on top of.
Well, he really does, and he seems once again to be burying his head in the sand.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:50 is the time. Right, let's talk about the Online Safety Act. Since it's come into force, we have seen something like 4 out of 5 of apps that are being downloaded are for VPNs. What are they? Well, they're virtual private networks. It enables you to disguise your identity and your location to access anything you want online. That's been blamed on the Online Safety Act, basically requiring ID, verification of your age, for you to see online pornography on all the major sites. Well, earlier today, Peter Kyle, the Science and Technology Secretary, said that anyone who's opposing Online Safety Act, crucially, he named Nigel Farage, was basically siding with the likes of Jimmy Savile, because perpetrators like him would have been online if the world had been in different tech times. Let's talk about this with Matthew Feeney. He's advocacy manager at Big Brother Watch, who keep an eye on basically protecting our civil liberties in the face of tech and government. Good afternoon to you, Matthew.
Good afternoon.
I mean, as I say, we've got these extraordinary words from Peter Kyle, but I mean, you guys are opposed to the Online Safety Act. I'm opposed to the Online Safety Act. I think an awful lot of our audience would be. Does that mean we're siding with a prolific paedophile rapist like Jimmy Savile?
It absolutely does not. This is like saying that those who oppose the Patriot Act or the Investigatory Powers Act are on the same side as Al-Qaeda. Public safety has long been an excuse that governments use to clamp down on civil liberties all over the place. And this is a very tired and well-worn playbook where those who stand up for civil liberties are equated with criminals. But standing up for civil liberties that have been hard fought is not the same thing as standing up for some of the worst people in society.
Well, indeed. And this, in terms of what this Online Safety Act does, again, these things are often couched as, look, we're going to protect children. We want to protect children. I'm a mum. I don't want any child seeing not just porn at all, but particularly the sort of porn that is freely available. Forget the dark web. They don't need to go to the dark web. Rape, violence, strangulation, incest, slapping. Really, really nasty stuff that is 3 clicks away for any adult or child. I would like children to be protected from that. I'd rather like adults not to be looking at that stuff, frankly, in terms of how it can warp people's brains and expectations and treatment of women and children and the like. But is the answer age verification or not?
No, it absolutely is not, and that's for a number of reasons. I mean, one is it's unclear that this will actually keep children safe because they can easily access VPNs or be pushed into the dark web.
And they're better at getting VPNs than their own parents, aren't they, usually?
Yes, oftentimes that's true. Secondly, it's unclear to me that this will actually help us mitigate the harms that you just outlined because the law completely ignores the context of a lot of harmful content. So teenagers who are interested in finding out about the harms of pornography, or it's not just about porn, also suicide, mental health, alcohol problems, are going to be prevented from accessing helpful information about that sort of stuff online. And this is particularly strange at a time when the government is advocating that 16-year-olds should be given the right to vote. Yes. And so we're in the strange situation where people will be able to vote in general elections, but be unable to look for help about an alcoholic relative or their own suicidal ideation. It's all very strange. And
that's been the trouble with sort of any kind of censorship, hasn't it? We had this during lockdown. We had our YouTube channel taken down 3 times. We were told for disinformation. It got put back up again only because of the might of the organisation we're employed by. But otherwise, we would have lost, as many people did, their social media and their ability to put themselves online. Even though what I was having conversations with medical and scientific professionals, having nuanced debates about relative risk of the virus, and yet that was called disinformation. An awful lot of the information that was suppressed during that period has turned out, by the way, to be completely and utterly true. And a lot of the things that were put out by the governments, America, Britain and elsewhere, were found to be not only found later to be untrue, but they knew at the time were untrue, whether or not the Wuhan lab had been responsible for the virus and things like that. And so when we're told we have to control what people can see and what people can say online, and this affects social media as well. We've seen protests outside the Bell Hotel in Epping. Some of the images from that have been unavailable to people online because it falls foul of these rules. Often it means that people are simply not allowed to get the full picture of the debate that needs to happen.
Well, that's absolutely right. And we should be in no doubt that there will be tons and tons of commentary that has nothing to do with violence, nothing to do with pornography, nothing to do with animal abuse that will be taken down because platforms do not want to face 10% fines of global revenue and will embrace the false positives and take down troves and troves of valuable content. And as you correctly pointed out, the online commentary is nuanced. It's very, very rare to find a piece of content that is evil or terrible just by definition of existing. People who want to comment on it, people who want to conduct journalistic investigations into it will all suffer because of laws like the Online Safety Act.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you mentioned those fines. There is a big issue in terms of, social media companies pushing algorithms and even, some of the big search engines as well, pushing algorithms which have pushed people who've expressed an interest in one thing. Look, we find it, you search for a sofa online, suddenly you're inundated with adverts for sofas. They're checking what you do. But we've seen, young girls being pushed towards, anorexia sites, suicide sites, and being directed and seeing more and more of that imagery. And we see that again in the pornography as well. This is happening. But the social media companies, this isn't happening by accident. They have designed the algorithms to do that.
Well, there is obviously a lot of competition among social media for people's attention, and every minute you're on TikTok is a minute you're not on Twitter or somewhere else. And we should expect that these companies trying to attract people's attention. And if there might be concerns about that, the answer isn't necessarily to reach for the blunt arm of the state to intervene. One of the most distressing things about this entire debate, it seems to me, is that very few lawmakers seem to think there are any institutions between the individual and the state.
Yeah.
Educational charities, media, academia, the family, all these institutions that exist between us and the government have been ignored, and the government has chucked out new ones and embraced this very blunt approach.
Yeah, indeed. Really good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us, Matthew Feeney. He's Advocacy Manager at Big Brother Watch. Tom Slater, Editor of Spike Online. Look, I mean, Big Brother Watch played a really crucial role in trying to keep freedom of speech alive, stopping censorship during lockdown, and they've been playing a really good role on this. You guys at Spiked Online as well. A lot of times we're told something's about protecting the kids, so it must be a good thing.
No, absolutely. The problem is that it infantilises all of us, doesn't it? It ends up leading to an internet that is just, by default, kind of on the child settings. And also, to be honest, a lot of what the government has claimed about this is only about protecting children. Even just trying to make social media companies kind of proactively go after illegal content always leads to them over-censoring. We've seen that in any other country it's been tried, and I just don't know why they're
except they
acting
don't take down the child pornography that's online, which is, they've got, you know, a handful of people dealing with that, but they're censoring our freedom of speech in other areas. It's a really difficult conundrum. And again, I often speak about, you know, not just as a journalist and sort of someone who believes in freedom of speech, but not a complete libertarian on that issue. I do want some controls on what certainly children are seeing, but I don't know what the balance is. But Richard Tice suggested earlier there are, you know, these protections. Okay, we need parents to do their job a little bit better in the future, but most parents haven't got a clue. I mean, if you want someone to mend your phone and sort something out, you know, or get VPN, you ask your 12-year-old to do it because they're better at it. Ian Collins, you have all of this. You've got the kids. What would you make of that battle over the Online Safety Act?
I mean, the point, and Tom was just touching on it there, they could, social media companies could take this stuff down, but they won't take the risk because if they get it wrong, they're going to get fined each time, etc. So it's easier for them, like Apple did with